Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another Orange Card, Blue Card podcast. And if you couldn't guess by the hints, my guest today is none other than the chief himself, Timmy Two Belts. He's been around the block for over a decade now. He has participated in every single event, and he has found results all the way from Legacy, every possible format we could play now up to My Hero. It is Tim Keefe. Thank you, Tim, for joining us. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm finally free of Dragon Songs Reprise. I can come do things like this now for a little while. Yeah, it's cool.
I've got the links in the chat right now if you guys want to go give Tim a follow. He has been creating content with news updates and just genuinely every time you speak about the game, there is something to learn. I really feel that, and I think the most hot button issue recently might be card evaluation, and you might be one of the people I trust the most when it comes to the difficult world of card evaluation in our game. And so that might be something that we talk about later. But the thing I'm most excited to talk about is your results recently with competitive play. You have won the first in-person regional license exam, and you won the Provisional Showdown Toronto.
Yeah, not the hugest attendance Provisional Showdown, but it was pretty fun. The Rochester guys were there. The Toronto people that did show up were largely playing some pretty competitive decks. There were a couple of Kirishima 2s at play in that event. And so yeah, that was a good time. I'm looking forward to going there for the regional in not too many weeks now, actually.
Yeah, it's everything's coming up pretty fast. It's been pretty cool. The first quarter of the year, people were begging for events, and we had to settle for online events. And now it seems like people are jet setting back and forth across the country every weekend. So very, very flip flop world here.
Yeah, I have not strictly played Tokoyami 3 times on purpose. It's kind of just been like, well, I haven't really had time to actually work out anything else. So here we are.
Yeah, and when it comes to adapting in this meta, in this environment, we've got sort of like the set release and then the plus ultra release, people get access to those cards. And then it feels like the provisional promos finally hit. So it's almost like a slightly different meta every single event. Have you felt that way going into, the multiple provisionals and regionals over the summer?
Yeah, there's been some just sort of, the bandwagon reacts. Yeah, I'm sure at Gen Con, we're going to have 15%, 20% of the field's going to be Kirishima 2 probably. Mm-hmm. That deck is, like most decks, it's not easy to play optimally or whatever, right? But you can sort of watch how, JJ and Andrew Duvall were playing it on the stream and be like, all right, I kind of get the vibe for this and play it pretty well, right? Mm-hmm. Reasonably enough that you're going to win games at your locals and feel pretty good about the deck. So I think we'll see plenty of that at Gen Con. But before that, there was an event where a bunch of Mays showed up as sort of a delayed reaction to Vegas. Mm-hmm. There was the much faster reaction to Vegas in Columbus, where a bunch of people were on Tokoyami. So that's kind of been funny like that.
Yeah, the Gen Con corridor of just of Tokoyami and fourth kind, that's not the format I wanted to play in. It's when I play against Tokoyami and fourth kind, both of them are just making me constantly count my ready foundations, for slightly different reasons, but I'm just constantly hyper aware of, like, genuinely, if I check a 3 against a Tokoyami turn 2, I'm just ending my turn and holding 6 cards. Like, I just genuinely feel better than committing 2 cards into that matchup 90% of the time.
Tokoyami's a weird one because he has that blow-up potential, but a lot of times in practice, he gets there on, like, exact damage, or he has, like, just one too many speed. Or, I wouldn't have gotten there, but you checked a 3 on 2 blocks. Mm-hmm. Right? He all these wins just feel like a little bit fluky, so it's always scary to play him because you feel like you were this close from going like 4-4.
Well, and I think that's really the high variance I think people talk about. I felt like the one event I played Tokoyami at, he was extremely consistent, but it came at the cost of me never turn 2ing anyone. So that's a huge part of it, right? Like, When it comes to the high variance, I feel like that turn 2 is high variance, and you watch Marcus Johansson's kill turn where he played literally all 8 cards in his hand, the 7 he drew plus the Summon Dark Shadow, and you go, wow, that's, what's possible, but is it consistent? And to me, the most consistent thing is if Tokoyami survives your first attack turn, he gets a free Summon Dark Shadow at least half the time.
His backswings are generally going to get there. Yeah, I never turn 2 people. Like, when I turn 2 people with that deck, as much as the turn 2s get the attention, it was almost always because they committed their character when they shouldn't have, or they did something really greedy like that, or it was a backswing, or it was just like something like a May where the deck's just built in doesn't have good early game defense, right? But I virtually never turned to somebody who was like there to play defense.
Yeah. The number one thing I learned from when I played in the first online regional playing Tokoyami was that the poking to give the Dark Shadow, that's not something I was worried about previously until I played as Tokoyami and I saw just how much better it was to start my turn with one. Actually holding a Summon Dark Shadow to review, going second, with the partial mulligan was such a weird thing. It doesn't seem immediately beneficial. Like, it's clear, obviously, I get to go pick it back up and it's like a racer head reviewing a race. You get to just discard a card to grab it back. But at the same time, it didn't register to my opponents either, because almost every single person who went first against me poked me, let me pick it up, and then did not play a long string of attacks. Like, genuinely was trying to get one momentum and move on. And of course, mainboarding Capture Evildoers, I'm happy to let them have that momentum.
Right.
So a lot of times it definitely feels like it was not me producing that early game result. It was strictly my opponent not reading the situation. And that's I think that's why you've talked about retiring the bird. Tell me a little bit about that before we get into all the nuance specifically of the events that you've won. Tell me about the current meta really quick, where you've recently decided after, I think it was Orlando, you said that Tokoyami might be in some rough waters now that Kirishima 2 has won an event.
I think Kirishima 2 is a rough matchup for him, basically. He has that mix. So some of my losses, well, I lose to 5 hand size with that deck. Ochako 2 nukes me every time, unless it's in the top cuts, apparently. Once I got her once in that one top cut that was on stream. I've lost 15 other matches to Ochako 2 or something. It's
one of my favorite stream matches, by the way. At least especially
that was
the
wild.
My Hero.
Yeah.
My Hero era. Definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, if Tokoyami cannot realistically threaten to kill you in one turn, right? If you can feel safe knowing that as long as I keep like a reasonable number of foundations up and some blocks in my hand, he can't one-shot me. And you can just say, all right, well, I get to play, 2 attacks, 3 attacks every turn, make him deal with it. He might have to partial block some things if he wants to breaker me. He might not be able to block everything. It might be, in Kirishima's case, a hardened shot that, is really pricey to block. If you're chunking Tokoyami with your poke turns for 6, 7, 8, and he can't kill you, right? If he goes all in, he's going to die. Just like try to poke you, but if you defend those pokes, then you repeat, right? Like, okay, well, I'm going to do 7 more, and you still can't kill, right? It's hard. It's hard for him to poke effectively if the opponent's trying not to get poked.
Yeah,
or he can, but he has to like put a lot of resources into it, right? He has to play the attack. He has to summon Dark Shadow, commit his character, threaten the big turn, and hope they decide to take it.
And the one thing that might be really understated, I think, is especially when you play cards like Crow and Frog in the list, you're definitely telegraphing when you're not going in,
Right.
Poke turns with a lot of characters can be ambiguous. With Tokoyami, it's almost never ambiguous, especially if it's a 1 attack. Like, you're almost always committed to attacking twice for that poke just to get real value from Summon Dark Shadow, I think. But when you ready Tokoyami to go into your opponent's turn...
Right. If you want to just... Yeah, it's like if you want to represent it, you have to like not do optimal defensive things.
Yes.
Right? You have to be like, all right, I have to turn that irrefutable sideways and seal something, even though I don't actually care.
Right.
Right. Because I need them to think that I might care.
Yeah. And so while there absolutely is some really cool things he can do, with a poke turd and the threat of all the follow-ups and all the much higher damage attacks do make poking not necessarily difficult for him. I do think the higher the top tables, the threat assessment gets to a point where you don't get away with as many things. You don't get those free summon Dark Shadow poke turns, and then that's where you see, I'm gonna say, the real Tokoyami, right? Like, I don't want to be rude to anybody, but when we hear stories about certain turns, I've heard some stories where people he killed me with just 4 giant ice walls, and it was the kind of thing where man, you didn't have one low block type of stuff.
Right.
So there's. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it should not go unmentioned. Learning the standards is an absolute beating for Tokoyami. Yeah. And yes, I sure am packing 4x irrefutable, but you also have the possibility of just if you don't find yours and they find theirs, that suddenly turns into a really tough game for you, unless if they have to take an attack to do it, right? So it's just another thing you're trying to bait out of them, and it doesn't seem, I haven't super tested it or anything. It's not like I've sat down with Birch or something and done 10 games or whatever, but it just doesn't feel very promising.
Right, and then you talk about irrefutable. You're committing one to essentially leave them a ready resource that their character will commit and blow up if they really have to. So I can definitely see where Kirishima is a tough matchup, and going forward might not be the deck. But let's rewind it a bit. Let's take it back to the regional. We'll start with the regional and go a little chronological for us here. Going into Orlando, the set 2 meta you talked about in your interview, you had started by playtesting and trying to see what the new Tokoyamis would look like. Tell me what was the light bulb moment? Was there any singular moment where you got to your testing and went, okay, this is the deck I'm going to play?
It's over the course. So I played with and against it. With the All Might 2 was the deck I was really hyped up on, because he does so many cool things. It's really neat.
He has some greasy card draw.
he cannot actually kill a deck in a long game. He ran into that. But and so playing with and against in that match, I mean, kind of just throughout the day, we tested for 10, 12 hours, just over at Jeffrey Kahn's house, throwing decks at each other, and the Tokoyami was just kind of not losing. I think it did drop a match to a Mineta, but it was by 1 damage. Oh. Right.
Rough.
And it was evidently, self-evidently close, right? And well, if those go for the wins were evil gazes, this would have gone better, that kind of thing. Okay. So it was just sort of the deck that looked the best coming out of that weekend. And, but for people who don't know me, I really highly prioritize being able to win long games. I think almost any deck, not literally any deck, but pretty much any deck, if the game gets to turn 4 or 5, they are allowed to do play 1 pass. Right? Just about anyone can enter that mode on you and say all right, I'm going to have 5 cards in my hand and 10 ready foundations every turn. And if your deck can't kill that, any good player is just going to do that, right? And you're the freest win ever, right? Any good player is just all right, if I get to turn 4, I'll put the shields up. They can't kill me. I'll win someday, right?
Especially when I think the defensive decks I've seen the most, excuse me, especially going into Orlando, were Eraserhead and Momo, the first defense first characters, I guess you could say. Froppy, Asui also a amazing wall deck, and those water versions are pretty heavy. They're 65, 66 cards. So we saw in I said going into Orlando, I meant Vegas. I'm sorry, the Vegas regional for those listening. But going into Orlando, we saw the Kirishima 2 versus Asui final, where they immediately went into that mode pretty much as soon as possible, right? So when Tokoyami sits across from those types of characters, the -2 speed, on face characters, Momo, Eraserhead, stuff like that, and really Asui with Rescue completed too. Where does the math like shift for you? Does it strictly become we need to prioritize getting more stats on things? Do you prioritize looking for your stun attacks, or is it really just like adapting to what's currently on the board?
Yeah, the repeatable -2 speed is certainly tough. Like I said, if it's coming from rescue completed, that's why we have 4 irrefutable, right? That's why we have Hellflame Javelin, and so if it's coming from a foundation, you can target it out. But yeah, the characters that have -2 speed on their face are a little tough for him. Luckily, Eraserhead doesn't draw egregious numbers of cards necessarily, right? Momo can tutor for something; she can kind of be like that. That's the other thing is like I don't know if more people are going to pick up that Momo that Kevin was playing or not, but that deck's kind of scary for him. But generally speaking, for the most part, he can get up and over just about anything, right? Even the Eraserhead, he can catch him with bad zones, just because of the nature of Eraserhead. The Momo's a bit tougher. Moneta with 3 momentum is basically impossible. Right. So you have to kill Moneta before he gets enough momentum. But he's one of the few decks that, if the opponent wants to turtle on them, he still feels like he can definitely win without needing to craft like a really crazy hand.
Okay. So we went into Vegas and it was winning pretty much most of the matchups. And were you specifically trying to dodge maybe those Momo or Eraserhead matchups? Did you have anything in the sideboard specifically for the decks that get to the play one passes? They're like staggering positivity, any kind of backup plan?
I had Go for the Win for learning the standards.
Okay.
Right, and that is still an option for the deck if you do want to play it. Right? You can maybe pack those either over Evil Gaze or just in the sideboard. But other than that, it was kind of just we had our 1 weekend of testing. The format was pretty new, and then off we went. I was like, well, this is the best I got. So here we go. Well, we'll see how this goes.
Do you think that it's a product of the trend, I guess, in card games where when a new format comes out, aggressive decks, aggro decks, faster decks, however you really want to put it. I know a lot of that templating doesn't really fit our game, but do you think the more aggressive decks benefited from the fact that the format was new? I know that they talked to Zach Pasley about reading a slower format, and there was a lot of the Meihatsumi and a lot of like the life wall decks, but do you think that you really benefited from a new take on a set 2 format?
I mean, a little bit in this sense, not in terms of the like slow decks showing up but in terms of there were going to be people that were trying decks that they thought were aggressive decks that weren't as fast as Tokiyami. Right. Is sort of the biggest thing. Like there was, I think I faced 2 Todoroki decks, and I mean they both nearly got me, right? Like Todoroki. One of the things about Tokoyami or playing an aggressive deck in general is that the decks that are quote unquote bad, 80% of the time they're bad because they can't beat the walls.
Right.
It is not very often that they're bad because the other aggro decks are just too much faster than them. They might be like 1 turn slower, but you're still like a good draw versus their bad draw away from just dunking them. So you can lose almost any match with an aggro deck, and that's sort of the dangerous part. That's why a lot of the better players like to play the defensive decks, because they're somewhat safer picks to get into top cuts with. But I'm always focused. Well, once I get to top cuts and I'm facing those defensive decks, like what do things look like?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when it comes to the defensive preference, I guess, when you talk about the mechanics of universes, is the fact that every block can typically save you from taking damage, right? Like every time you perfect block, realistically you're not taking any damage, and even if like the throws in the format have a good amount of answers to them, there's a lot of interaction for them. So you get to buy yourself multiple turns to see your interaction, and generally from there, I think that it might be a misconception, I might not be putting this the right way, but I think from there people feel confident that they got to not only play the game just because of the turn count, but at that point it's really their skill expression. It's the sculpting that you did, it's the choices and building that you made, and the cards you got to keep. Do you feel that way specifically when it comes to the length of games? Or do you think that, the fact that Tokoyami can play the 4, 5, 6 attacks, that is a, quantifiably skillful measure?
I think there is a lot of skill expression in this game in navigating the risk reward stuff, right? Of navigating, if you're a deck that can do that, you have to spend that whole turn trying to figure out, can I still get there? What have I checked so far? What could I check next? What do I think is realistic about the blocks in their hand? Can I back off? If I try to play defense with like half my stage, what does that look like? What do I think the odds are of them drawing gas, right? And all that stuff comes into play. Whereas if you're playing the long game, your goal is basically to take all of the risk reward out of the game and turn it into a chess match. And the chess match is skillful in its own way, right? But it's a different plane that you're operating on.
Right. There's the control check system. The mechanic is essentially a press your luck element, at least the way I look at it. And one of my favorite things, especially when playing competitively, is at a point when someone, typically they say something along the lines of, well, it can't be 3 attacks in a row, right? Or it can't possibly be another attack, something along those lines. And, it's very hard because I do it all the time, right? I'll look at it and go, look, there's only 3 attacks left out of however many cards, right? And still go for it. But there's so many games where if you just pull back, if you just tell yourself, I don't have to tap everything. And I think the biggest part of it is if your board looks like you can play defense, even if you know that all your block mods are terrible, right? If you look like you can play defense, that changes things a lot. I think a lot of the best defensive cards, like learning the standards, do the work that they're supposed to do without being used because your opponent chooses not to attack. And I wish that was the thing I could get better at personally, and the thing I could actually teach people is when to preserve your board state to still look like you're not going to be killed. And a lot of times that's really difficult. A lot of times, especially if you are playing aggressive deck, you don't have that defensive interaction. I guess really what I'm trying to say is, how many times do you think that you had a bad hand, but just choosing not to commit any resources bought you a turn? Specifically playing an aggressive deck like Tokoyami.
Yeah, I mean, again, so Fire, you do have heroic lineage, you have ice gun, you have some speed hate, you have some nice block modifiers, right? You're not as defensively exposed as I don't know, the all in life Asui is, for instance, right? If she decides to sit back and represent, well, okay, I know you've just got attacks in your hand.
Right.
I'm going to try to get them out of there, right? With Tokoyami, he might have a bunch of actions, he's going to pick up one for free. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. The thing with Tokoyami is it's on both sides. It's okay, if I attack into him and I commit half my stuff, I'm dead. Right, yes. Tokoyami's backswing against a half committed board is probably lethal.
Yeah.
Or it feels that way if you're the opponent. Right. So I get a lot of value the offense being the best defense kind of thing. But also, right, there's value in looking like you don't have defense, but you have a hand trap, you have an evil gaze specifically.
Right.
Or you have that +1 block mod that they're hoping you don't have or whatever. The +0 body blocks that Jose likes to talk about. Yes. Yeah, Tokoyami has some pretty good breaker. And then that can get you that backswing. But yeah, I honestly don't often think about representing a fake defense. That's not something that I would think about that a little bit more recently of that's not something I do very often that I should probably do more often. Like you were saying, Garrett Brett's probably the best person at this.
Oh man.
Garrett will hold the fakest defense. He'll hold the worst blocks on the face of the earth. But he's got 5 of them.
Yeah,
and it just looks like he's ready to block everything. But I've played against him so much. I actually beat him in a top cuts by sniffing that out. I'm like, your hand's actually garbage. I'm just gonna attack right now.
I can't say I learned it from him or anything like that. And I still haven't really perfected it myself. I still constantly see myself saying things like, well, if I just check 2 5s, I actually win, right? Like my brain wants this to be over. I want the stress to be gone and to just win the game. But there has been plenty of times where I've been, hovering over Garrett's table and I go, my God, he's got 3 dust in the wind in his hand, like he's got a great board, but he's certainly not blocking any fast attacks on these zones. So that one stuck out really bad for me because I remember he blocked with a Templar and drew 2 more dust in the wind with one already in hand, and I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into the old times weeds, but like a lot of my play style just comes from slamming Kazuya for 2.5 years or however long it was. So there's a character, a Tekken character, Kazuya Mishima, back in the day, and he stacked up like Mount Lady did. Yes. Only what he did when he got an extra character was he could throw one away to blow up everything. All Foundation's assets, both stages gone.
Yeah, he could just nuke the board.
So he would deliberately put the game into states where both players were operating on a small stage and nobody was getting out of the risk-reward decisions, right? You were both attacking and blocking unlimited resources. You were both trying to decide, I have to take some attacks, I'm not blocking everything, right? And just sort of challenging people to those knife fights. And like obviously being a deck that's built to play in them. But sometimes you face another deck that was also very capable of playing those games. And I got a lot of practice in those situations just because when my games got to turn 5, we still both had 4 Foundations. Like that's just the way it was.
Yeah. I'm going to pop them on screen just for people, so people can see, get some reference for the Kazuya there. It's definitely one of those things where I find myself frustrated at getting to that chess match that you talked about. But then I find myself in those chess matches not prepared for them. And then I get really upset at myself because I feel like I haven't been here this often because I'm so focused on surviving these really aggressive, really explosive decks, and my deck is so overtuned for that I don't that I don't win games unless there's a backswing. Right. And do you think that that's like a good, like a healthy part of a meta to have, is that like the difference between the aggro, late game, and mid-range now? Is it that mid-range decks are dominating?
It's weird because I think there's sort of not a lot of mid-range. Well, it's hard to say because a lot of people would call like their decks mid-range when other people would call them aggro or controller or whatever. Yeah, right. I think Hiroshima is a pretty mid-range deck, right? He is realistically, if you're pushing him, he's not going to defend forever.
Right.
Right. He's not really that equipped to do that, at least not against a wide range of decks that are putting speed on everything or whatever. But he's also probably not very likely to turn 2U, so I guess that's the definition of a mid-range deck.
Right. I see him as a 6-hander with the powerful defensive ability. I see him specifically well-suited to survive one big turn, but not to survive play one pass very often.
Yeah. He can, if he knows what he's right, if you know that that's what your deck is, right, you try to block all those pokes. But if you get into a chess match with somebody and they're trying to block everything, he can, right? So I feel like there's like the top class of decks that can just like definitely get up and over a wall just because of the sheer overwhelming stats or whatever they do, that being Tokiyami, Asui, and Jiro.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're all capable of just like overpowering most walls. Not every single time, right? Not every single game or whatever, but they're just sort of clearly inherently capable of it. They don't need the best hand ever.
Right.
And then there's a class of characters that can do it, like they can pass 7, 8, 9 attacks, but they need to craft the hand for it.
Mm.
But if you're Kirishima or a Toga or a Momo, your character helps you craft that hand and may or may not help you like pass the checks depending on, the exact nature of the character in the deck. So I think those are sort of the 2 late game plans that are working right now.
I do think Earth has decent enough deadlock that Kirishima does have legitimate late game. So I don't want to misrepresent that by saying I don't think he automatically loses to the play one pass decks. I just don't think that it's particularly the style that it wants to play. It doesn't want to get into
he wants to get into a brawl. If you want to brawl with him, he's going to come out on top a lot.
Yeah. He absolutely will just trade attacks for attacks in a sense, right? Like And specifically, just from the little bit that I've been able to watch of it on stream, because when I've played against the one time I played against Kirishima 2 in Orlando, it was just really polarizing games. Just really like, oh, here's 3 chops for half my life because I'm a 7-hander and I have to block the third one. There's just, what can you do? And in that sense, I think that, chop's one of those cards that is really great early and really great late.
Yes.
It serves relatively two different styles but the same function. And when it comes to defending against cards like chop, it almost feels like you're at the mercy of your opponent's hand, right? Like when it comes to stuff like that. How do you prepare for defenses like that? Like how do you adapt to a deck that has hardened chop? Do you just automatically hold more cards? Do you always be afraid of it? Do you always just ration your health around it? What is something you can adapt to on the fly when it comes to hardened chop?
Yeah, it depends on what kind of deck you're playing, right, and what kind of matchup you're playing. So, like with my Mina 1 deck, but I've played into Kirishima a few times with that. I think I won one and I lost one that I should have won if I played correctly. Because my character gains health back, and I don't want to take a hit, but my character does more when I take a hit. I'm like, all right, just going to take the first chop, probably, right, in most cases. And once one of those lands, then I have to figure it out, right? But hopefully by then I found some struggling with studies or something. You can sort of take a similar approach if you're just like a 6 or a 5-hander. You're like, all right, well, the first one's just going to hit me. That's just what it's going to be, right? But if you're a 7-hander that you're expecting to play a very grindy game, you're expecting that this chop's not going to be the only thing you're going to feel forced to take over the course of the game. Yeah, then you sort of have to figure it out. Kirishima, to the extent that he has weaknesses, it can pretty nicely be summarized by passing the torch.
Yeah.
He just does not like seeing that card ever, because you can probably pass every block you draw because he's not putting speed on things. And Hardened Chop wants to stretch your hand out, and passing the torch says like, well, I had 0 cards. I guess I have 2 now. So it could also just be a passing the torch deck is another way to deal with Chop.
Yeah, the whole Kirishima 1 kit, right, is all about maximizing the value you get pretty much from each card in relation to hand size. Whether you're able to actually loop attacks from your stage with jab, whether you use the celebrity status, which is a super good combo with Kirishima 2. One of my favorite, really, to play, like as far as just like a streamlined, simple offense, low risk, medium reward kind of a thing, typically, where you get to hit somebody with, like, any attack you hit them with, celebrity stats gets to bring back with your character draw, which is really oppressive when you want to block these attacks. When you know that, like, turn 2, that attack's actually killing you, but if you block it now, it's killing you too. Do you feel like there's, in this game, specifically to UVS, do you think that there is just a lot of gambling, just a higher amount of risks or chances that you have to take?
You mean like compared to other card games?
Yeah, like for example, it's really easy to say, okay, well, this card game you play a land and you can play 1 card per turn, or, for a game closer to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, a lot of it is one person doing like a ton of things on their turn with limited interaction from the opponent. I guess what I'm getting at is, are you making guesses? Are you just sort of guessing a lot more when you play this game rather than trying to analyze every possible play your opponent can make?
I think I don't want to call them guesses, but I'll call them judgment calls and risk reward decisions, right? I think there are a lot of them in this game, and many of them are so complicated that you can't human calculate them, right? If you're trying to make a judgment call decision on what block zones you think your opponent has in their hand,
right?
Yeah, you just it's that's where it comes down to experience and trying to get a feel for your opponent's deck. What are the odds that they have 2 Faith Shields? How many of they? You can look and see how many they've checked. There's things you can do to try to narrow it down, but that's also why you have multiple like different play styles among successful players, right?
Right.
You each person is sort of going to have developed their own individual barometer for how they feel about different risks in this game. Right? Some people, like in my case, unless I feel awfully good about a matchup, if I see a 70% chance to win, I'm probably going to take it. Just say like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm 50-50 if the game keeps going, so let's just do this, right? Whereas other players, I remember watching Garrett in a legacy final. The game was just like literally mathematically won unless he hit a one check. And he just said, you know what? No, because it will take an actual miracle for Dave Wagner to kill me. So I'm just going to try to turn my 99% to win into a 100% to win. And then Dave Wagner drew the miracle and killed him.
Oh, yeah. No. I thought you were going to tell me it was a one on top of his deck.
Yeah, no. I don't know it was top of his deck, but there, you can play the game like that. You can say like, you know what? I'm going to keep hunting for the hard lock definite win. And then, when you're playing that sort of defensive deck and there are the Giros in the format, the decks that can get up and over you, you have to learn to adjust and say like, no, I don't get to do that. Like at some point I just have to go race this person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a pitfall that I fall into more often than I'd like to admit, where it looks like a good race for me, and I jump into it a little too early. But when you're talking about the miracle hand, right? Talk to me a bit about I guess comebacks in this game, if you want to look at it that way. One of the things when it comes to games that are a little more even keeled, I'll guess, as far as like turn progression goes, there's a lot of games where the game is over before it's officially over. A lot of games, there's a card that's a win condition and it's going to exist and it doesn't kill you immediately, but the game's over.
Yeah. The blue white control deck in Magic is reach turn 8 and they've got their untargetable does God knows what angel or dragon hybrid thing out.
It draws cards and gains life, of course.
Yeah.
You're literally talking about Dream Trawler, so
okay. I see.
It's actually untargetable, and it draws. It gets bonus attack for every card you've drawn. Then it draws when you attack, and then it also has lifelink. So. One of my favorite.
Glad to know those decks are still around.
One of my favorite creatures, but one of the most boring formats to actually play blue-white control in, unfortunately, because the card was only like a 5-drop. It was not hard to actually stick. But yeah, exactly that kind of thing where like, yes, you can sit here and I can hit you for 5 turns because I haven't done any damage to you and my health is going to go up, things like that. But in UVS, because you get to drop back up to that hand size, because offenses are so explosive, and because decks are tuned for these long string, get over this hump defense, do you think that one of the best things about Universes is that it's not really over until it's over?
Yeah, and like even if you come up short on a swing, they could break, right?
Right.
Or you could have kept just enough up that like, okay, I can block one frog lashing. And hopefully they don't have too much else, right? Mm-hmm. But they think you can't block at all or whatever. So there's some of that, like if both of the decks are good, then part of, at least to me, like part of being a good deck is that you can give yourself a chance in almost any situation that you come across, right? So, and I think that aside from like actual like turn 2 the life Osprey played 8 attacks for 60 damage. Like, okay, that deck's toxic. I don't, but
that deck got
like
me,
those games are just the blowouts, right? But aside from games like that, or games where like the one of the decks is just not ready to backswing somebody onto, which is maybe makes it not a great deck, but some of those decks can be fine in different metas, but like they get battered down to 4 and they're just not realistically defending 4 health or whatever. So like you can have those long game snowballs, usually means somebody has a bad deck, right?
Right.
Somebody has a deck that cannot get over a long game wall, and they've been blown out. But that's never like that's not like a fundamental part of the game, so long as the tools in the format exist to get over those walls. And right now we just don't have that many, unfortunately. But it's a 2 set format. That's sort of part of it.
Right. It's one of those things where the defensive interactions are pretty pivotal. I think they're either going to be a stopgap for that offense because of that risk reward you talked about, where okay, if they blow, you're so obvious, whatever defensive tool they have, if they use it at the right moment, a lot of times you have to then peel off. There is essentially no reward if you're going to tap everything out and not kill them, right? So and so I do think the balancing act of defensive pieces is extremely tough.
Yeah.
Reusable defensive pieces are almost never powerful enough to feel great, I would say, a lot of the time. I feel like I see less and less specialist of sound, for example, as time goes on. People are encouraging training partner and release for like their defense on some of those symbols, right? So reusable defense, is that something you want to see more of, or do you think that the trend should still be like a powerful remove or a powerful flip cost?
Yeah, I mean, I think reusable defense certainly contributes more to like making it hard to win against a big stage, right? If you don't get to like poke that training partner out of their stage, then if it's a specialist of sound or whatever, then like there's no getting rid of it permanently, right? Unless you use a foundation snipe. So I do like the dynamic of one-off defensive nukes. Usually, those lead to situations where you can keep yourself alive on turn 2, turn 3, but in a long game, like they're not going to keep you safe forever. So I think those are overall healthy. I think we're seeing more of them in a reaction to, aside from Asui, the decks, a lot of the decks that are blowing out, getting up and over are the Tokoyamis, the Jiros, Fourth Kind, are all decks that want to make attacks 7-8 speed, right? So encouraging training partners very good in that regard.
And I think those decks too are really good at specifically jumping on any mistake your deck makes. Maybe not necessarily a play error, but those decks are more punishing to check a 3 at the wrong time.
Right.
Those are decks where you really feel like, okay, all 3 of these cards in my hand have to fully block an attack. Or at least for the Fourth Kind, you'd have to block the really big one.
Yeah. Fourth Kind, I better block the big one, and if I decide to block something else, I better not have given up my chance to block the big one. I better like have fully wrapped my mind around what that big one might be. And maybe I've decided that if it's high engine kick, I'm just taking it, but
yeah. I've certainly lost games to Fourth Kind where their turns were essentially always reciprocal extend into acceleration kick, and the acceleration kick is too fast to block because I'm at 5 foundations. And I attempt to block the extend and I check a 3 and I go, well, I can't afford to do that. And I just take 10 turn 1 and I take 10 turn 2 because the same process happens, right? So
yeah.
It's definitely one of those things where card games have uncontrollable elements. They certainly wouldn't be that fun if we could just go and choose all the cards we like the most out of our decks, right? We could have perfect turns every time. But I do think that the powerful one-time use defense is good for the chess match you talked about. One of the important parts about chess is that you have to sacrifice those pieces. You have to give up something in return for that benefit. So that is something I would really like to see continue. And I think going forward it would be best to see, how do I put this? I want to see defense that is not based around statistics, right? We have damage resets, we have speed nukes and damage, and we have a charged up which resets damage. So we have some access to things like that. I'd like to see more cards like learning the standards. If you could have, we'll say specifically defense. If you could say like a specific effect you'd like to see, what would it be?
Well, I think it's funny because I think we have like I like Cheerful Uppercut as a defensive card, right? And I
Okay.
think Learning the Standards is a cool defensive card. And it's a lot of it's just the overlap in the symbols, right? The
Mm,
symbols that have some of those cool cards don't have speed resets,
yeah.
right? They might not even have like an actual commit minus speed. I think they have, a bunch of the ones I mentioned have graceful maneuvers, but like
Mm.
Evil has cool cards. Can't do a lick of anything about speed,
Yeah.
right? But
Shock
Evil
absorption.
actually has a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah. The evil is surprisingly weak to mid attacks. Actually, clever distraction doesn't reduce
Yeah,
the speed, and shock absorption feels really bad if it's not committed already, and it feels
yeah,
pretty bad if it's already committed to.
I had that problem with the Chaos Ochako that I was running in the set one format. Was like, oh man, Pillar Swing's really bad for me, huh?
Yeah.
I can't do anything about this. My
Yeah.
training partner doesn't work because it's 5 speed. It's stunning me too. Chaos doesn't have any stun. Clever Distraction doesn't work. Like,
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, blowing your breaker blocks on it doesn't feel great because it leaves, even if you do manage
even
to.
if you do manage to pass it, yeah.
Yeah. So that was, although I didn't play
But
too
yeah,
much Pillar Swing because I kept getting plus ultra blocked. That was genuinely my issue.
yeah.
So,
In my case, I'm obviously talking about Ochako too because who else is bashing my brains in all the time? But yeah. So it's weird because like I think there's a lot of like you think about like okay, well, what if this card had this symbol, or what if this
mhm.
character had that symbol, and you think about like how strong they would be defensively, right?
Yeah.
What if life could have cheerful uppercut or something, right? And a lot of these
Not
and a lot of
life.
these decks are like you can totally build a water deck that is the I am not dying deck that or at least not dying easily, right? I'm gonna play Wall Clang, Faith Shield, Creepy, Cheerful, Sticky Balls, Ice Storm,
Mm,
Giant Ice Ball, whatever. I'm gonna put Toru on top. Like I'm gonna be a nightmare to kill, but like that deck's not taking down a wall ever, right? So
right.
it's that's one of those things where like if depending on what's in set three, what feature set's coming out, some symbols are probably going to get some tools that kind of help them. Like I definitely thought like early on when the first set came out that Sarah was going to have this like really cool long game inevitability, right? Just because of the way he works, how hard it is to
Yeah.
block him necessarily and feel good about it, and he's just like eventually going to kill you, and that hasn't quite panned out, but if he gets some more tools, we could see him make a surge, you know?
I thought specifically I was going to see tape stream jab everywhere. I thought just the
Mm.
fact that it clogs the card pool was going to see it shoot up, in value. You would see like I was expecting to see like a 50-50 Osawi, like closer to Tyrell's list. Tyrell Scott had like a full range package. I think it was 20-30, similar to the life list, at least, ratios. And, I thought Tape Stream Jab was going to be the new hotness because card pool clogging was so good. And it turns out you just kind of play better statted attacks, right? You just, it being 3 mid and specifically for Zero 2 being like a 6 hand size, slightly slower version of other decks with no defense on face really outside of, I guess you could say his enhanced commit to commit one is
Yeah,
defensive, but it
yeah,
certainly doesn't feel like you're getting ahead of your opponent most of the time.
yeah. Right. It's with Sero 2 specifically. I was talking about Sero 1 before a bit,
Oh,
but
sorry,
Sero
my
2 is
bad.
like I've thought about like okay, and I think Tam played this on a stream, the Searing Glacial Storm Sero 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, all right, but what happens when they say like, oh, okay, I'm gonna keep Specialist of Sound requesting assistance and my 2 amphibious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like we're both at 5 foundations, but you sure have 10. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it like Steering Glacial just doesn't have a lot of overlap with the bonus foundations.
yeah.
But that's one of those cards. If Steering Glacial Storm had air,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
those decks would be probably toxic. But think about how good it would be, right? Like,
Would be pretty cool.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I've been looking for ways to activate amphibious defensively for a minute, and I'm surprised. Like every time I try to use travel by tape, it just doesn't work out for me. You know,
Kevin Broberg's going to be in your DMs about Momo after he hears this.
well, that That's the thing. I can't wrap my head around Momo. I get lost on the foundation count every time. But I want to go back to the Zero one because I apologize. I did mishear. I thought we were talking about Zero 2 when Set 2 rolled around, but the inevitability of Zero 1. Break that down for me just a little bit. Like, what's the strategy behind it? Just specifically the fact that like so many decks can't keep up with the hand fatigue.
Yeah, like some of this is formed. There was a public play testing right period, like 6 months before MHA came out, and nobody knew what any of the characters were or whatever. But
Right.
and when doing that, the character that wound up being Sero just had this thing about him where you would play against him and you would lose, and you would have no idea how you lost that game.
Yeah.
You just like got chipped down because you didn't want to partial block, so you just like took 4 here and 6 there. And for whatever reason, like the deck's not being refined or the cards being tuned differently, like his defense was good enough that like you just couldn't find a way in.
Hmm.
And then he would look at your hand and he would take your block away, and then he'd hit you for a string for like 13, but you were only at 11, so
Right.
and then you're just like dead and you don't know what happened at all.
Yeah.
So he had like a lot of that energy, and I thought that was gonna manifest in the actual format since we'd seen it before, but like it's some mix of like the block modifiers on void and water maybe having different better options or whatever. It just like hasn't quite added up.
Yeah, I think for me running into the issue where, well, I guess for one, it surprises me that tape swing and like a poke deck wasn't quite as effective early on in the beginning. A big part of that was Kirishima 1. Like, I think it's very strange to me. I think that the game would actually look a lot different now if Kirishima 1 wasn't legal. Like, if he had come out with the errata, if he
Right.
had been changed, right? Something like that. Because I feel like there's a lot of decks that missed their heyday, and they could have changed the way that we perceive things a lot. And I think Zero falls into that because at the time there wasn't a ton of decks that could really deal with um, tape swing, especially if you are picking the right zones, if you're ripping the right cards out. Like Wallcling does absolutely nothing if they don't have a mid block, and you know what I mean? Like if you're once you're
Right.
winning the zone game, right? So I think that the poke decks not being effective early because they all lost to Kirishimas and a lot of Frappies really kind of set Zero back as a character. But when it comes to losing to him, it very much is that sort of like, okay, well, I'll perfect block whatever I can, and then start taking half damage from stuff. And then all of a sudden, he still has 6 cards in hand, and he's not tapped anything yet. And you're like, oh no, I'm at like 10 to 13 life, and he can just rail off like printed damage attacks at you that you can't do anything about. So it's a character I don't want to ever fight because I hate discard decks personally. So I hope he doesn't become good at all.
But he's one of the characters that is maybe you could say that. Like I said earlier, I think most decks like the thing they run into is that they can't beat the walls. Sarah might be one of those that like just on his symbols or the way you have to build them, or like if you build them off of water, you have to think about running sticky balls because you have 2 checks, like things like that.
Yes.
He might be one of the ones that is actually a little more shut out by some of the aggro, especially Asui, right? I've never been one to play decks to try to get them banned, but I'm thinking about this Life Asui. I think that deck is hyper toxic, and it's just like any thought of playing Sarah is just like, I'm not beating that thing. Like it's just not gonna happen, right? Like
when I first faced the deck, I looked at it and went, man, why are we not all just doing this? And I've heard that so much because at the end of the day, even if you don't win, you still got to spend, 40 minutes of your round doing whatever you want. I think for the online events, I think that should be our new meta as a community. Is we all
right.
we all just play 7-minute Asui.
Because like it's one of those like I don't think they could like ban anything on the basis of that deck right now because it's shown up in one event, right? It's give data, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But like I wouldn't be surprised if somebody does really well with it at Gen Con and the bandwagon hops onto it and the online provisional actually is just a frog aggro hellscape. Like I could
Yeah.
see something actually happening to that deck, even if like it's not blowout ratios, like if it's doing a lot of 6 and 2 and things like that because it's losing some foot races to some 5-handers or whatever.
Hmm.
It's just it feels very narrowing of the format to have if that deck's actually going to show up in events in any kind of large count, striking every deck that's bad against it off your list just it and then still having to worry about the walls just feels so constraining.
Yeah, it feels like it would definitely corner a format. Luckily, I do think there is a deck. I did some testing with Daniel Nelson, winner of Provisional with Asui. He kind of did his take. He heard about the deck, didn't actually see the deck list. At least that's what he told me. I'm not so sure because he showed me the list and it's like 5 cards different. It's like added to it tags. I did my own take on it and we played them against each other and his was just like much more consistent. He still he had the same amount of new training method, which I thought was suspicious at 2 of, but that's that's the same amount. He took out the Recovery Girl's Kiss for some more readying foundations like Someone with Style, and he had a rescue completed basically, and 2 Cannon Blast. So
Yeah,
we
I can
were
see that. I know the UA guys have their own modification on the deck. I think everyone has their own like. What did I take? What did I put in place of Recovery Girl's Kiss?
yeah,
Basically.
basically. I trimmed 2 preparing for battle 2. Like basically, instead of maxing out on early turn build and the draw power, I went more for maximizing readying foundations because I felt like I can nut draw enough attacks and things like that. So we played. And I discovered that the reason I'm not going to do that, why I'm not going to just run the Life Osui forever, I might still play it in an online event, just because of that 7 minutes I can get up and out, But it really is just like the slap fightingist, sock and boppersist, like
Yeah, it's just
pillow fight deck.
yeah, like it gets the turn 2 going first kills, but it's not like always getting them or even like getting them most of the time it goes first.
Yeah.
At least if the opponent's defending. So like they're almost always going to have a turn to swing into you.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you get paired into a Jiro or a Tokoyami or whatever, you're actually just going for like, all right, make me block with these attacks. And I'm probably going to live because I'm probably still built out to 9 or whatever. But then I have to like actually draw the gas as opposed to starting the turn with 4 in hand.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. I think we talked a little bit about trying essentially the same idea because I had it Excited for Blood for my version. It didn't really increase my card draw power too much over, just again very much depending on like what type of defense I was against, right? And we thought about just switching the same idea to water, and you can really sort of do the same thing on all of her symbols. You can actually do a lot of the same stuff on air too if you were concerned specifically about digging through your deck and just playing on turn 2. But the one silver bullet to this deck does seem to be Eraserhead. Asui, specifically the aggro all out versions,
Right.
the slower water versions and the Travis's second place list, I think is still pretty well suited to deal with Eraserhead. It's just not going to blow them out turns 2 or probably 3. But if we ever did get to a 3-deck format, I think it would be something along the lines of Asui, Eraserhead, and then probably actually like a 4th kind or something that just has
Jiro or something.
Something that has like some raw health between the 2 7-handers. Jiro probably too because it's good against Eraserhead actually.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because like that's what I was saying. Like I don't think it's ever going to get to like Hiroshima 1 levels of like
right.
6 copies in a top 8 or something. It's just unhealthy.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing where I don't want to prepare for that deck specifically because I don't know what I do other than have a
Play
Eraserhead.
specific Silver Bullet. Yeah,
have a Eraserhead in my list. I played unwavering slash to tutor up an ultra compressed weights into the deck, right? And it did not actually help me. The man never cleared his card pool until he was on checking on sevens, but it's okay because they're frog lashings, you know. It's
Right,
okay
right.
because he still hasn't used amphibious yet.
Yeah,
So
yeah. His turn three, the turn threes of that deck will very often be able to get over one progressive.
yeah, so
So then now you need two, right? You need a Faith Shield and a Learning the Standards, and hope they don't have Renegades that go. And like,
well, that was still his turn too. He did not attack me on turn three
oh,
ever.
he just had a
Yeah,
big starting build.
yeah. I just went first in every game.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
got
yeah,
to,
yeah. That deck's turn two going second is like sort of close to its turn three going first, right? That's
yeah.
sort of it. It's the you got one turn.
It's very much set up with the idea of like we were talking about where you have the decks that are tuned defensively to survive that first turn and aren't really built to just jump on you turn two. And I think he was really taking advantage of that, right? Like he did beat JJ, he did
Yeah,
beat me playing, so he beat the winner of the event and had a great defensive ability, a good defensive deck. And still has some of the stuff really well positioned to deal with Osui, like tanking some of the
yep.
damage on, reducing the damage with cards like Resistance and Self-Sacrifice on those strings can be really important. And so, and having extra 2 card draw, right, for if you absolutely can pass those checks. Probably not without Speed Hate, but I'm rambling. But so we saw where it only lost to another Osui, which had very similar ratios but better defense, and it
Right.
beat the Kirishima that beat the late game Asui in the finals. So it's definitely not like there's no 9-1 matchups. There's nothing that is
Right.
skewed heavy one way or the other. It's just all about finding like a nice healthy balance, because if we get to like a rock paper scissors sort of format, a 3-deck format, again, I agree with you. I don't think it's Kirishima 1, but I don't think people will be happy with the 3-deck format either. If you've
Yeah.
played, I was going to say, if you've played other card games competitively, if you've ever existed in that 3-deck format, does that sound like something that would be displeasing to you, or is that something you'd be okay with?
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those people that never liked the exact implementation of the diversity rule that they had, but appreciated, right, that it meant that when I went to an event and played 8 rounds, I was probably going to face at least 7 different decks. You know, so
Okay.
if it got to an actual 3 deck for it, it it can be really frustrating when like you're trying to come up with a new deck and map out its matchups against like, okay, these are the big four,
Right.
which is even like almost the state now, but not quite, right? It's like 6 or 7,
Mm-hmm.
and part of it's just the sheer volume of like, okay, well, say I decided that my Mino one was good enough, like on what basis, right? Like, am I really gonna like say that my 10 matches of experience with this deck are better than the combined wall of event results that say that this character's not good enough, right? Like,
Yeah.
it becomes like just a logical trap to try to not play the meta.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of what I'm worried about, is that like even if the card balancing is really good and good enough that there are actually, I mean, maybe there are 15 viable decks right now, but it's just not logical to try half of them, you know?
Right. Well, and I think a big part of it too is when it comes to specifically the defensive perspective, I typically am not, and this might be just me, but I typically am not looking at characters. I'm looking at attack
Mhm.
lineups. I'm looking at the fact that we talked about in the diversity days. It wasn't that I was worried about Sung Mina
Right.
or I wasn't worried about Rando. I was worried about Scarlet Meteor, right? I'm not worried about Jiro specifically or Momo. I'm worried about a Staff Strike deck, or I'm worried about a Home Run Comet deck, or I'm worried about an Asui line. I think Asui and Tokoyami, what I'm getting at is, I think they get a lot of the heat because I don't think people play decks that look like theirs. They don't play. You can't play like the Asui version of Zero, but you can play the Staff Strike version of a Racerhead, for example. You can
Yeah,
play
yeah.
the Ida Kicks a Racerhead, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean by like there are obviously like lots of flaws with the diversity rule. It's just like And there were formats where you basically had situations where you had the same deck on 5 different characters just dodging diversity, right? Like it's not there were problems with it, right? But
CA's claim
I
to
think
fame is being a sandbag character.
yeah, but it was nice to have some added level of encouragement for people to try to find something new. And the culture of card games, and especially the culture of this game, is to still try to do that. Like a lot of the top players are just used to trying to find their own decks, right? So that's
Yeah.
part of the reason why you don't see a lot of rampant coalescing behind 2 or 3 decks, is because all the top players are still trying to innovate. 'Cause that's just what they're used to. That's what they want to do. That's what they enjoy. That's why they played this game, right?
Right.
But I do think like over time that's going to degrade and like erode, not quickly, just slowly. But I do think it's possible that in 4 or 5 years we're going to see a lot of 4 and 5 set metas that aren't even based on like actual viability, just based on numbers and rational decision making around like, well, look at the results. Do I really think, how much do I weigh my personal experience versus the tournament results and what all my friends have played XY deck are telling me?
Yeah, and I think from before the webcam, the online play era, we very much had the pocket metas, and then they'd all meet together and be like,
right,
oh, this is what these other, I remember playing a lot of Basilio San Juan decks that were supposed to just be Dimitri, but tankier than Dimitri. I got paired into like 2 of them or something from Omaha playing as Dimitri 1. And I narrowly beat the first one and then got the experience from that to beat the second one. And, it was always kind of cool and refreshing to almost have to like learn the meta as I go. And one of the things I was really afraid of just with the reboot for MHA was that things would devolve into people just sort of deciding, oh, this is the best statistical deck. And so it kind of gets forced, I guess you could say, into a format, whether it would strictly be like good or not or fun or whatever, like a deck that people would choose, but one that would take over just because someone figured out like some kind of numerical proof,
right.
like the strict math that Kirishima 1 is just better than everyone, for example. That's the kind of stuff I'm afraid of, but I don't know if you can really do that with our card games mechanics. It's very easy it's very easy to evaluate a card from Pokemon or Magic because they specifically have gates you have to jump through to play them. Typically in our game, the hoop is checking a 5, and your deck is built to do that a lot. So do you think it'll ever be the kind of thing where we'll ever have a consensus on what the actual best deck is, without the top 4, the full top 4?
Without the Kirishima 1 thing happening.
Which we still have people who don't think Kirishima 1 was a problem. I just want to put that out there.
That it was coordinated effort instead, specifically, right? He got through public playtests basically like that, although because
his attacks were very different.
His attacks were different, and there's a lot of like coming from standard, right? People are like, yeah, you should be able to kill a deck like this. One set format, the tools aren't necessarily there.
When I didn't do a whole lot of the playtest, it was difficult for me to, we got all the images, and I had to put all the images of a symbol together, and it wasn't until everything got uploaded digitally onto a TTS table that, I could really wrap my head around deck building. And even then, it's still difficult without the use of Ultra. It's such a blessing, UVS Ultra. But the 2 games, the games I played, this is so very funny to me. The games I played specifically were what turned out to be Ida 1 and what turned out to be Kirishima. Those were the 2 decks I gravitated towards. And I think I was preferring Void Symbol for both, right? And I played specifically into what would become Eraserhead. And I remember going, wow, there's literally no reason to play anything other than Eraserhead.
Right.
And the only stuff that really changed was I think Eraserhead could discard Erase to get the +2/-2, which was like a buff for him. but then they nerfed all of the attacks that he was playing
His
and
entire
buffed,
kit.
yeah, and buffed all of the attacks, or at least made them easier. Like there might have been an attack that was technically better, but like more late game, right? So all of Kirishima's stuff got better. All of the stuff that Eraserhead was doing got worse, and it was like when the game came out, I still thought Eraserhead's going to dominate Kirishima's, and he 100% didn't.
Yeah, and that was a little bit of insight, like a public insight, but I know sometimes people meme on bin match advertisement, right? And like stuff happens in testing, One of the things I did in 2014, 2015, around that era for like a couple of years, I led design and playtest for this game because the three people that were Jasco at the time were busy with the board game Kickstarter. And like I can tell you, the last phase of playtesting is always card changes, right? It's never. It's always test, change things, test, change things, test, change things, proofread, maybe change a couple things after you proofread, and like the less because you're never going to go through a phase of testing cards where you don't want to change something.
Yeah.
So my assumption whenever I see a card like mid-match advertisement was like, okay, in the last phase of testing, somebody broke whatever this used to be. And they just needed to make it have some sort of text that was decidedly safe. Yeah. It was the day before deadline or something, right? It's like, all right, whatever. Like you're going to have some of those, and it's not necessary. There's absolutely no chance that they tested that card with that text on it and said like, yeah, this is a good card, right?
My best guess is that defensively you could block 2 attacks and then just flip to gain 2 life, and then it was strictly better than rigorous training and recovery girl's kiss. And I guess it's not even strictly better because you still have to have 2 cards. But
my assumption is it just did something else instead of the gain 2. My assumption is that it did something silly, right?
Ooh.
That was just too good.
It probably drew a card.
I don't know about draw 1 card, but maybe it drew 2 cards. Right? Yeah. You could see that.
It was maybe it was. I could see it being like gain 2 life, discard a card, draw a card, and they were just like, let's take off the draw.
Yeah, it's a little much. Yeah. You could see something like that. But yeah, it's just like a tangent because we got to talking about the public playtest, and I was just reminded of that. It was just like, give the design team a little bit of slack and the playtesters some slack here. Like this stuff is just kind of normal and expected. And you'd much rather this than they last minute super buff something that becomes insane.
Yeah, I remember one of my favorite stories was the Dark one, I believe. I think he had to pay life to ready himself or something like that, or maybe it was desperation.
Maybe both players lost one when he committed or something.
Yeah, well, that's what he ended up being. Both players lose one when he gets committed, and I think it was like one-sided at one point or something like that, or yeah, I think it was one-sided, and then it was like, well, it felt really bad for him to just get like 5 free damage off of it and do it on your turn and stuff like that, and they didn't want to get rid of that tiny little ability on it, and so they decided to make it mirrored, so you couldn't just keep doing it defensively, and get away with stuff for free. Like they didn't want you progressing, your kill turn, right? And then they bumped him up like 2 health, and that 2 health made a massive difference in that format. Like going from he was he was like 29 or 30, and he got 2 health because like, okay, now he loses health every time,
right?
And I was like, I just don't have to respond anymore, like to burn, and little things like that are huge. Do you know the story behind Siege Rhino?
Behind what?
Siege Rhino, I know I go back to Magic the Gathering a lot.
No,
so
not a clue.
Siege Rhino took over a format for like 2 full years. It didn't get banned. It got rotated. People were upset about it, but like power level wise, it was never truly like the menace that people thought it was. But the important thing is they released the design diaries, I guess you could call them, the design documents for Siege Rhino at one point. Ristic Studies has a great whole video on it, if anyone's familiar with that YouTube channel. And like literally in testing, they were like, this is a 3/4 that trades with a 4/3 and everything's fine. Then they decided we don't want it to get chumped block by like 2/2s or something, so they bumped it up 1 health. Then they like gave it trample because it needed to have a green ability. And by the end of it, it was a bolt that, you know, drains you for 3, is a 3/6, and costs 1 more mana than they originally thought it would. And now because of that, it like dumpsters everything on its tier, right? Like literally everything they went through. And it started out, by the way, as a card that said, if you discard this card due to your opponent's effect, like draw 2 cards. Like it was specifically an anti-discard card.
Right.
Doesn't do any of that by the end of it. And it all starts with the tiny thread of we don't want this to trade with a specific creature in the set, right? And it blew my mind when I heard that, because like the amount of control that their design team has, like the amount of influence they can have just by adding 1 health to a creature and saying, okay, people will go from never playing this to playing it in every deck on its colors now because it doesn't trade on the turn it comes down, you know? Is that something you think you can realistically do with UVS design, or is there a few too many things at play?
Yeah, it's with UVS, some of it's perception, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can almost guarantee that people won't 4x staple a card if you give it a 4-check. Right? You know,
yeah.
Like you put a 4-check on a card, like, all right, if this was a 2/5, it would be 4x and everything, but it's a 2/4. Now people are going to think about it.
Yeah.
Right. So you have some, and those may or may not be justified thoughts that people have, right? But that's the way people think about deck building. Yeah. I have a little bit of that with. There's like some of that where like if you change, obviously like difficulty is a really impactful number to change by 1. Mm-hmm. But something like speed or damage, not so much. Right, like the difference between a 2-speed attack and a 3-speed attack only matters if they're failing their block, right? If they have a +1 block, it's probably not going to matter. If you're increasing its speed, it might matter. Like stuff like that gets into the really vagaries and stuff like, you know, the cost effect ratio of certain abilities. And also like, okay, should this cost 1 foundation? Should this cost discard 1 card? Should this not cost anything? Should it be once per turn? Should it be a flip? Can be a little hard to nail down. So like, it sort of varies behind what sort of thing you're talking about, because like stuff like 4 versus 5 versus 6 check can have a really big impact, but stuff like block modifiers may or may not have a big impact. If you give a foundation a +1 block, it'll see a lot more play, right?
Yeah.
A 2 versus 3 doesn't always hugely matter.
I think when it comes to adjusting damage, right, you can easily look at it where if it's not going to a new damage bracket on a partial block, you're probably safe. Mm-hmm. You know, going from 7 to 8 is nowhere near as impactful as 6 to 7. Right. And likewise, speed, I think, matters a lot more. Like going from 3 to 4 speed is a much bigger jump. So there's a lot of different knobs you can adjust, and they're not weighted equally.
Yeah.
I think block mods might be one of the hardest things to really nail down, because I'm amazed at how well some decks can block certain zones. I'm amazed at how well certain lineups, you know, it's like you build a deck sometimes and you're like, this has all the effects I want in it, and I have no low blocks, you know, and then then you make a different deck that is just playing, you know, everything on its theme or everything on its, you know, symbols or whatever, right? Like everything with its keyword, and you're like, wow, I have a perfect block spread like designed for me. So I think blocks are probably one of the hardest things to nail down. How important is a block spread when you're deck building?
I value it probably higher than I should, if I had to guess. It feels like every time I decide to like get really cheeky and be like, all right, I can play a deck with 8 low blocks. That's when I run into 3 rounds of my event is like Ochako 2 is trying to double 1.3 million bait.
Right.
Or like the low zone Nomus or whatever are suddenly all it's just like can
we not play low move?
It goes back to like trying to give yourself a chance to win any kind of game, like whatever game you might wind up finding yourself into, because Even if you get to like a quote unquote four deck meta, you're still going to run into God knows what in Swiss, right? And so you still want to be prepared for whatever might show up. And if that's decks that are going to try to bum rush you with throws, can you race them or stop their throws? Either way, right? If there's decks that are just going to spam low attacks, there's a wide range of things you want to try to be prepared for. I remember my first big competitive event was a 2008 Nationals. And again, I don't want to
2008.
go too deep into like the actual details of this format.
Yeah.
It was a one deck format, essentially.
Is this wait, let me guess. This is Hugo.
Swipe.
Oh, okay.
This was the swipe format.
Okay. Fair enough.
So you could put basically any character on this deck, and the decks were 4 cards different at best. And I knew this going in, right? I knew that this was the format. That all my travel companions were playing this deck, or some flavor of this deck. And so when I was practicing with them, me being a hipster, I'm like, I don't want to run that deck. I want to come up with something that can actually beat this that is not that deck.
Right.
And after trying like 4 or 5 different things, I found like just the right mix with like just the right like silver bullet character that's attacking in just like the unusual way that they're not ready for. That could actually like 60-40 it. Okay. And I'm like, all right, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. I go into this tournament in this one deck format, and random jank that has no chance of winning just blasts the hell out of me because I was just like, was not even comprehending that someone might play something else. And that's what I learned. Like, no, they'll play anything.
That you were the random jank, Tim. You were also the random jank.
No, but these like no hope decks, right? Like just like
these are the decks that beat you and then go 0-2 drop afterwards.
Yeah, because I was playing like a shockingly honest game that like was tooled in just the right way to like get through what they were doing defensively. But like, yeah, if someone wanted to throw me to death with Zangief, they sure got to do that.
That's actually hilarious to me because that's most of my experiences. I think the most concentrated effort. Now, I missed a couple of events. I missed most of the nationals, and I made it to every Worlds, but I missed some nationals that were really important through like 2017, 18. But when we finally got around to like Worlds 2019, 2020, I felt like it was like the most locked in we were for the format, specifically because the strength was concentrated around the attacks. And it was, like we were talking about, like I have to be prepared for the Scarlet Meteor, I have to be prepared for this loop, I have to be prepared for assets and this and that and this, and which character is doing it wasn't usually the most important. Like Songmina gets dunked by overly dramatic, that's something to be mindful of, right? But like most characters I'm worried about don't have that linchpin. And the rhetoric that I've always heard was that your deck needs to be prepared for everything. Not just like the format, not just the things that are prevalent right now, that UVS decks have to do a little bit of everything. They have to be able to kill you in one turn. They have to be able to poke and use momentum. They have to be able to play defense and answer. They have to be able to cancel everything, right? Like literally everything. When I say that people meant everything, they said you have to reduce speed and reduce damage and everything. Everything. And do you think that was A, ever actually true? And B, do you think that that's going to persist into MHA, or like that sort of idea of decks that can run a cancel for everything, decks that can wipe attacks for a 1-for-1 from your stage? Do you think that's going to be an idea?
I don't think, like, we'll see. If the format gets big enough, maybe you could make a deck like that. But I don't think decks need to do everything. But you need to be ready for the possibility that your opponent could be doing God knows what, right? You could face a May where if the game gets to turn 5, you're in ginormous danger, right? Mm-hmm. You have to be prepared for that possibility. You have to be prepared for the possibility of like All Might Two's going to show up and try to throw you to death. You have to be prepared for the possibility of like someone is actually main decking Toru. Well, now what, right?
We're thinking about it, right?
Yeah, I never stopped thinking about her, and I always just like I can't actually kill people, but boy, I want to try it.
Toru is the number one. I guess I would call it like the sideboard syndrome. It's the number one character where I just throw it in my sideboard. I don't actually have a plan for her. Then I side into her during the event, and I just go, huh, I get to block all the fourth kind attacks I want to and still lose. And still never actually,
Yeah,
like
right.
I get to still not block the first reciprocal extend. I get to still not waste my response on the acceleration kick. And then if I don't have the right block zones, I still just get attritioned out. So when it comes to sideboarding, that's probably a place where I think a lot of people need to up their game. But I also think we could use a few more cards in our sideboard. We only have 10 card sideboards. How do you feel about the size of the sideboard?
Um, I think I still like 10 right now. I think it's it's probably at some point unhealthy to let a deck be two decks, right? The transformative sideboards, like obviously you'll find situations where they're sort of possible. Like I know we have the fourth kind in Rochester. Our fourth kind list will transform into Ingenium out of the sideboard.
Ooh,
Because those
gross.
decks are close enough. Because
Gross.
Ingenium is better in certain matchups than fourth kind. They have a lot of similarities, right? But
Yeah, no, now you mention it, that actually seems like a really solid swap.
yeah. So like you have some situations like that, but I think it's good for those to be pretty limited. Like it's cool when somebody can swap. People like being able to swap characters. They think it's really cool. I wouldn't want to take that out of the game.
Yes.
But I appreciate it that it carries a price, right? So I would be scared if we got to like 15, 16 card sideboards or something. I would be scared of like people actually just bringing two decks to the tournament,
Yeah, I've heard before that that's something that people are worried about, or like select people have naysayed in the past, that they don't want the whole deck to transform. But do you think that having a more fleshed out sideboard adds any competitive integrity to an event, right? Does it make decks more, I guess, streamlined, or does it make it so that the format is more readable and it's more about how prepared you are?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously like a skill expression element to sideboarding. Right, I think going from 8 to 10 would increase that skill expression, but there's a point where it's a balancing act, right? Because at some point you don't really have any problem fitting. Like to bring it to the absurd, right? Imagine
Yeah.
if we had 20 card sideboards,
Right.
and whatever, if there was a character that had a silver bullet, that would matter. Like every sideboard could have four copies of that silver bullet for free.
Right.
Absolutely not really like detracting from what they're doing. So like they can obviously get too big, where it's just too easy to include everything you want. So I think with a 50 card deck, I think 10 is fine. It's like 20% of your deck.
Yeah. That's kind of where I landed with the smaller deck size from MHA. As much
Yeah.
as I've wanted a bigger sideboard for a long time, someone pointed out that it would be more than a fourth of your deck that you could actually
It was
swap
a 15,
out.
yeah.
Yeah, so I do think that if it gets to the point where you could swap out a character and an entire attack lineup, that's probably too much.
Yeah, or enough of an attack lineup. Like, okay, well, we're all playing 4 jolts, but everything else we can swap. Yeah,
Yeah, that could probably be a little iffy where you go from playing a charge deck to a kick deck like overnight,
right.
or over sideboarding. So that kind of stuff is really cool, but I agree if it trivializes it to sort of that point, right, where, like you said, you can actually run every silver bullet, which I don't think we quite have any silver bullets just yet.
Yeah, but there's cards like Fulfilled My Duty
Yeah.
that are sort of, I guess in my imagination, they should be on the fringe of most sideboards that don't know that, because it can silver bullet Asui, right? And it can trip up a lot of decks, but like it also does nothing against a lot of decks.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite pieces from set one that I don't find myself playing very often.
Right.
Unfortunately, it being a 2/4 with a rough block and actually destroying itself it just seems like it's really a turn 3, turn 4 defense. And that's actually a card I'd love to find a home for. Ida 1, pretty cool, getting to play that first enhance. And like we've joked in the past that his real ability is he gets to play Fulfilled My Duty as a first E.
And confused.
Yes, and true, and actually now I gotta go play Ida 1. Great. Now I'm Ida 1 player, and I'm gonna go 4/4 and drop at the online. Great. Here we go, Tim.
This goes back to where I started today, right? Cool stuff. Good defense. Not winning a long game.
6 hand size.
Well, 6 hand size. Nothing that's gonna let him overwhelm in a deck with an attack count.
Yeah.
+3 speed once per turn is not going to overwhelm your ability to pass blocks. Kicks get pretty fast. He's not putting damage on them.
Right.
So it's just like, how actually are you going to get there?
Yeah, you actually have to either use a one-time use spam foundation, or you have to actually commit resources to get damage pump. A lot of the time, usually you have to have momentum, have that resource. So a lot of different pieces coming together for the kick lineup. But it really kind of struggles to punish you, right? Like the Recipro Burst decks typically don't get to punish you on that first backswing, that first crackback.
Right.
And knowing that, being able to read that, people often just yeet everything into Ida and say, okay, shut me down, Fulfilled My Duty. You're going to go down to 4 foundations, right? And then what are you going to do?
Unless you're Recipro Burst Denki.
I've never gotten that to work.
Which is probably not good, but it sounds funny.
I wish I could get that to work. I've tried a couple times to play Order Denki, but maybe I haven't tried it with his new his new 5-speed low attack. We could maybe just go mono lows except jolts. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's one of many decks like I thought for a few minutes before thinking about like, okay, what decks are actually in this format? Yeah, this is really happening. Like, yeah. Kirishima turned sideways. All right, nice job, Recipro Burst.
Yeah, exactly. The huge part of its game, or a part of Kirishima 2's strength, is like you can't just cheese them out with one big attack usually. That's why Cannon Blast is actually super scary whenever I play Kirishima 2, because you're like, oh man, which one do I? Once you run out of blocks, you kind of got to do the math on which one to actually have, and it. I guess that math a lot of times gets deterministic too. Don't get me wrong, because if it's going to put you at 3, you can't. You have to respond.
Right.
But the thing I want to mention was earlier today I was actually doing some play testing against an Ida 3 that I was playing Eraserhead, and I said, okay, I'll actually like tap some stuff out. I'll play some attacks, get some pokes in, right? And was like, it's cool. You're Ida 3, you're not that great. You'd literally have to draw a bunch of acceleration kicks to kill me. And of course, the attack string was like extend, acceleration, Recipro Burst with 2 momentum, and 3 fusion down or something like that. So it's little stuff like that where I think that's where people get their NPE, they get their like really bad habits from. Is looking at a deck, looking at a turn like that and going, okay, I can never do that again, like in competitive play. And then also thinking that every deck is going to do that to you all the time and locking yourself into that play style.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like, you're like, okay, well, I'm probably 90% to live if I'm a little aggressive here.
Mm-hmm.
And the 10% happens, and it can be hard to, especially when you're just starting out, to figure out like, what did I do wrong that game? Like, what caused me to lose? And if you're new, there's probably things you were doing wrong, but it's hard to sift through the whole map of like, here are the cards that were played, here are the checks that were played.
Yeah. And
you can decide that like, oh, what I did wrong was this, when the thing that you actually did wrong was playing out all your high block foundations on turn 1 or something like that, right? Or you reviewed that card that you shouldn't have reviewed.
One of the big ones I see is reviewing an attack just because it's the only attack in your opener going second, and you want to draw 2 cards. It sounds better, but that attack was like a +2 low block, and
it was a nice block. Or you survived their attack turn, but you didn't quite have the backswing.
Yeah,
you sure reviewed that frog lashing, like
Yeah, it's that's the stuff I kick myself the most on is when I block with an attack, and then they end their turn, and I go, "Oh man, I really could have swung if I had that attack." And that's the beauty of the game, right? Is that not like the best part of the game?
Yeah, you got. I mean, you know, they also like might have attacked again if you didn't block, right? You can attack with the plan of like, I want to strip that block from their hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know I wound up losing this match and the deadlock and so on. But like that game 3 against Travis in the Orlando top cuts, like that was what I was like, okay, well, I just need to keep poking attacks out of his hand. Yeah. Because if I let him craft, I will die. And until I have the gas, and you know, again, Tokiyami doesn't need the best hand ever, but he's still gonna need a pretty good one to get over 15 water foundations. Right?
All your attacks are blockable. Like you either have to commit your whole stage to deal with his speed hit, or your attacks are gonna be blockable.
Yeah, and so like I was just like surviving by attacking, right? By like trying to disrupt the handcrafting. And you know, we got to the last turn, I was like, all right, well, and I wasn't full committed from the start, right? I was like, I'm going to play the first couple attacks and see where this is going. And then decided, like, my odds were good enough. I could force him to have the Faith Shield. And, you know, in that mix, I forgot about the Deadlock because I was thinking about so many other things.
Yeah.
It's really funny. I've never forgotten Ice Storm's Deadlock because I love it so much. So I've never had a game where I forgot it, right? So it just wasn't something I was prepared to worry about.
I've definitely won some games because it was not the first enhance I played. So
oh yeah. Like, oh shoot, I should have done this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I recently have been, especially while testing Eraserhead, I've run into this issue where I don't keep track of my own deadlock. I just play into their deadlock kind of blind, and I haven't really been punished by deadlock too often. However, for some reason recently, I keep running into almost exclusively quick creation, you know, unwavering / asset decks. Not necessarily staff strike, but like specifically they have quick creation and ways to tutor it. Or I've been running into decks that have the void deadlock discard your hand stuff. You know, Taiyaki Fanatic and Fusion, I think it is. Or it's either Fusion or Fruits of Our Labors. Fruits of Our Labors.
Yep.
Yeah, Fruits has Flippy. I have to build one from my hand down. So, you know, I've been not afraid of deadlock very much at all. Especially like once we got past the first villain encounter days, that used to be the scary deadlock thing. Now it's not being seen as much, right?
Yeah, decks are sort of terminated. They're playing Trishik Cape instead, right?
Yeah. Trishik also dunked me actually earlier by me just going, oh well, I actually have 12 foundations after I blew up 2 mediators. Go figure, you know. And they just played and I've won a game actually recently by just playing 4 naval laser beams, all just generic statted, very blockable, but too many because of the deadlock form. How important is the deadlock keyword when you come to building your deck? Do you ever go out of your way to make sure you have some deadlock threats? Or is it the kind of thing where if it fits your lineup, that's cool, but you're not going to go out of your way to put it in your deck?
I think if you can't include deadlock that's good enough to pin them at 10, then you need to feel really good that, I mean, this is sort of stating the obvious, but it's worth laying out, right? Like, either your deadlock's good enough to pin them at 10, or you better be able to kill them through 20, right? Those are your two options, right? If you can't kill them through 20 and you can't play deadlock that's good, then your deck's probably not viable.
Right. Well, and you talked about prioritizing being able to win long games. You know, we talked about how a lot of the times you win those early games, it's based on the card draw, right? It's based on the hands that you drew and things like that. But so, would you ever include a card just for its deadlock effect? Like, say, like you know, it has 2 abilities. One is basically useless in the deck, but the deadlock effect is good. Would you play something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not for deadlock, but I mean, the Hellfire Javelin is almost that, right? That's pretty close to that sort of idea, right? It's there expressly for the late game situations.
It depends on how aggressively you mill yourself. I've got some turn 2 Hellfire Javelins.
Yeah, the Chaos Ochako had uh, zero gravity capture in and out, which
Mm,
did some other things, right? But it was also mainly like this deck has no deadlock that matters, right?
right.
Without aside from Ice Storm, which is fine. It's pretty good. It's pretty good in Ochako specifically because she gets +3 speed on her face. The but still like not if they're cruising to 16, they don't care that much.
Right.
Um, so I have done it. I've contemplated putting back to back in the Tokiyami sideboard,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is weird super regen, but mostly just has deadlock.
Yeah.
But that's a card like if I were to say screw it and play Tokiyami anyway at Gen Con, I would probably have those on my board for Hiroshima
Okay.
to
That makes
like
sense.
shave 3 off of that back and forth and keep him from cruising to deadlock against me.
Okay.
Because he's hard enough to kill as it is.
Man,
Yeah.
that's a card I thought was gonna be really legit. Like my first concept for Tokoyami, no joke, full wall deck, evil symbol wall deck.
Oh yeah.
Um, using back to back and super regen as like a I will flip 2 foundations instead of blocking. I thought in the Typhoon was gonna be cool. Like when it dropped, wasn't available yet, and I was like, this guy's an 8-hander who becomes a 9-hander if you attack him. Stupid ideas like that, things that don't pan out when you go to actually play the games out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean like they could in future format, right? The evil symbol could have more good broader defensive tools, right, at some point, or the block zones for some of these builds could diversify a bit where like you're happy to be picking up mid blocks actually, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There could I think it would really take another ally card that does something within the card pool, something you really want to just get into the card pool for any reason.
Yeah.
And then wouldn't necessarily have to stay there very long because there's the cool Tokoyami Foundation that will add it back to your hand now for a destroy cost.
Right,
So
right, yeah.
there's a lot of cool stuff you can do, and I think that's just one of those kits where the ally keyword's not the most natural thing to just slap on stuff. You can put Fury or Charge on nearly anything.
We're getting Coda. I wonder if he'll share with Tokoyami at all.
It'll be interesting. I am
It's
upset.
probably going to be ally stuff, right?
I
Kind of has to be.
You would think. I'll say that.
Right.
You would think. I would assume. I don't know. I have no clue what they're going to actually do for Coda. I have no clue what he does in the show personally. So,
his ability is he can talk to animals and control them.
Oh, he gets him to like do favors for him.
Yeah, he can like attack people with a flock of pigeons, things like that.
Ooh, that's kind of sick. Why have I never seen this character like dumpstring people with like a rhinoceros or something?
Yeah,
Like
MHA's logic with which characters it profiles is a little weird sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
Like I've always wanted Uraraka to just use a sledgehammer, just like a hyper-dense sledgehammer that only she can pick up, just a Thor hammer.
That's so genius. That's actually super cool. I know she does the pillar swing is like the cool trick where she yeah. Why doesn't she just get like a tungsten hammer to just like drop on people?
That'd be a little too violent for a children's show, I guess.
Yeah. Who's the
They would need to start doing blood.
Who's the teleporting character? Is there a teleporting hero in the class?
Kurogiri is a teleporty guy. He's a villain though.
I was about to say he's probably an evil character who teleports.
He's a warp gate kind of guy.
They always give the busted powers to the villains, so you can overcome it. I was thinking how funny it would be, Ochako can make anyone light enough that she can pick them up, and then you just teleport them to the Nightcrawler drop. Be kind of a not very hero thing to do, I guess, but you don't have to drop them from a lethal distance if you want to pull that card, but
Right.
But yeah, so when we've been at this for almost 2 hours, man. It's been absolutely a blast chatting with you. I've had so much fun.
Yes.
We've just been rolling through topics. We didn't stick to any kind of script. No plan. I imagine I'll have you back again at some point to actually go through all of your amazing wins and feats and things like that. I did want to talk a lot more about the specific events that you played in, but like I said at the top of the hour, it's just such a pleasure to pick your brain and get your thoughts on so many things But I wanted to turn the tables over to you. And is there any specific topics, any subjects that you're really passionate about, or you think people should talk more about, related to MHA? I know Andrew Holder was on the soapbox about provisional promos. We've had people complaining about getting lunch breaks and things like that. Is there anything that Tim Keefe thinks is not being addressed that needs to be talked about?
I don't think this is a near term thing, but I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I'm thinking of obviously, since I'm in the thick of it, I've been thinking about the regional points lad a little bit.
Yeah.
I forget if we talked about this on air or not on air.
Not on air. We were not
on air. Yeah, so I think that could definitely be better next year. I think the gaps in the points are probably too steep.
Okay.
I think 25 for first and 3 for top 16, or even like if you want to make first a huge number of points, sure, but like 18 for second and 3 for top 16. Getting second is not 6 times as hard as making top 16, right? Like it's like it is harder, right, to a degree. You need to win 3 top cuts match. That matters, right? It's not that hard to. There are decks that sneak into the top 16 that have no business winning an event or whatever. But
right. I didn't realize the gap was that big, actually.
Yeah, it's 18 points for second and 3 for top 16. It is. It goes 3, 6, 12, 18, 25. So winning your top 8 match doubles your point haul for the event.
Right. Yeah.
In particular, right? That jump is really steep. And so I think they could probably level that out a little bit. Like I understand like wanting it to be ascending and whatnot. I think that's fine, but it could be like 3, 6, 10, 15 or something like that, or some 10, 15, 20 or something like that. Just a little bit. And then the other part is something they did for the retro series in 2020 was they said like, all right, we understand that we're not going to expect everybody to make all 6 of these.
Oh yeah.
So we're just going to compare everybody's best 4 point totals, I think it was, out of the 6 events. So if you can't make a couple, no problem. You're not inherently behind or anything. But obviously you're going to have to try pretty hard in the other 4. Or like if you want to play in all 6, but you want to play meme decks a couple times, go for it, right? Chris Bromley talked about this a little bit on Tuesday too. Like it's the pressure to like try to maximize every single one of these regionals is kind of depressing, right? I really want to just like play this Mina 1 at Gen Con, even though like I understand she's probably B tier, right? But I'm still like in the thick of this point race, and I'm probably like closer to being able to take 1 off, right? Because I'm in second. But like someone like Kevin Broberg, Christopher Bromley, like if they want to get into qualify, they have to like go all out every single time from this point forward. And like it's just so much pressure, and it's like at some point this is supposed to just be fun, like we're doing this for fun. So I think they could probably either also by like opening up more spots if they rearrange it somehow. So like that's one thing that's at top of mind. They don't have to worry about that until like they're doing their 2023 planning, obviously.
Right.
But I think the regional point system could be a little bit kinder. Like I'm stressing out about missing Pasadena.
Ooh, yeah. When Broberg had first mentioned it, he mentioned how you pretty much have to win one to be a lock, to be close to
have a chance, right?
Yeah.
There's like 8 of them, so that's winning one's not even a lucky win, but winning one, like if you don't win one, it starts. If you don't at least like make a second place, it gets really hard.
Yeah. And then he had mentioned he had, I think, top 16, top 8, top 4, and wasn't close. And that's when I started to worry about it. That's when I went, oh wait, maybe I don't want to broadcast a regional. Maybe I want to try and win one first.
Yeah, I'd love to commentate one of these, right? But it's just like it's not an option until like I think 50 points is probably good enough for a lock, and I'm at like 35. I don't know. I'll have to see how these next couple events unfold, but
hey, if you win Gen Con, you got to feel pretty good, right?
Yeah, but like I want to play memes at Gen Con. Now I have to like try to win, right? That's the thing.
Well, how about this? How about if you win Gen Con, you can treat yourself by going to Pasadena. You can sell the champ. Pasadena
overlaps with a 14 raid tier. There's like 2 weekends a month that I want to commit to, 2 weekends a year that I sort of want to force commit to 14. So Pasadena just overlaps with that. And like, if it was the Invitational or something, like obviously I would go to that instead of the 14 thing, but I would rather not like skip out on my week 1 stuff to go do an RLE.
I understand that.
But on sort of a similar note, I am coming up. We're going to have this nationals. I'm a little bit worried about that, and this is maybe just more of me being a softie or whatever. If I am fortunate enough to be qualified going to that nationals, right, where if I'm one of the top 5, I am probably going to try to commentate it.
Okay.
Because I don't want to be in a position where I'm in the top 16 of nationals.
Yeah.
And I'm facing, if I was like facing Kevin Broberg in the top 16 of nationals and he wasn't qualified, I would scoop him in, right? Because the top 8 qualifies for the big one. But then like, okay, well now I have to draw a line of like, who am I going to scoop to? Who am I not going to scoop to? Is somebody going to be upset with it? Like, it's just a really ugly situation for the 5 people who have been qualified at nationals. Like that's going to be awkward for a lot of them, depending on who they are. Like if they don't really know that many people, maybe they won't care, but I could see that being kind of yucky. But I'm a little worried about that. I don't know what they could do about it. You don't want to like ban them from playing. You don't want to just like say, we'll pay you off in promos to not play or whatever, but like maybe they could fold them into some coverage or some side events or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really, it's the very first season, right? We're trying all kinds of new stuff. There's all kinds of, experimentation and fluidity, right? It's all very different. I'm sure a lot of things have changed back from January, right? So that's definitely one of those things where at the very beginning I told myself I can't worry about it. I'm just... Right. First of all, like just being real, like if I wanted to worry about it, I have to commit to getting better at the game. That's just a reality of it. And then on top of it, I knew that if I stressed about it, once in-person events opened up, the travel was going to become like an issue for me and trying to chase it down and like things like that. So I've been really lucky to go to Orlando. I've been lucky to play in the online events that I have, and I feel very lucky that I'm going to be able to go to Pasadena. Fingers crossed. I actually haven't locked in my flight yet. I keep waffling on that because like the price will drop and then it'll drop for like 2 days and then shoot back up to what it was 2 days ago. I don't know what's going on, so I'm going to try locking a ticket soon. But
incognito mode.
Yes, absolutely. Every time. For anyone trying to book flights, don't use your cookies. They will track you and raise those prices. So, but yeah, so that's definitely been a thing for me where I just kind of had to, and that's why I didn't know. When Broberg told me he was nowhere near contention or like nowhere near being guaranteed at the very least, I thought that was insane because we're talking about one of the most consistent performers in the game, right? We're talking about somebody who has had deep runs on multiple decks and who, won the first provisional. At the time, I also thought that the provisionals counted.
Mattered,
so I thought that really blew my mind, but once I realized provisionals and regionals are like the different level, right? But yeah, so that kind of, this is what we talked about before the stream a little bit, was the Pro Tour points from Magic. People with like 20 points are like esteemed veterans. They're like people who have traveled to multiple events, topped maybe 5 events and got 3 points each, and they're like, he's coming in here with 19 points and he's about to qualify for a cash payout, kind of a thing. And obviously we cannot compare the two games 1-to-1. I don't want to start doing that. However, when people were talking to me in Orlando after I lost in top 16 and going, hey man, at least you're really consistent. I've only missed 1 top cuts in my hero, and it was still tiebreakers. I got 18th out of 16, right? And
that's me.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I got at Origins.
18th
out of 16 on tiebreakers, actually. Yeah, it was a top 8 cut, but like I'm minus 2 points on those tiebreakers.
Oh, rough. Oh, the top 8 too. That would feel double salt. Well, do you still get the same? No, we did talk about the gap being huge, but do you still get the same amount of qualifying points for the regional?
The Origins, for Origins, even though they only cut a top 8, it was still the other top 16 still got 3 points.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the top 32 gets 1 point. Which it's nice to at least get the point for top 32 if you bubble out.
Yeah, and so I was thinking maybe it could be the kind of thing where again, this is just borrowing ideas from the existing franchises where maybe those points can be banked and turned into something later. Maybe the fact that, you only have 12 or 15 points and you're nowhere close to the cutoff for qualifying. Maybe going into the next season, those Pro Tour points will help qualify you for something. I don't know if it would be specific invitationals. Maybe you could exchange them for a one-round bye at a provisional or something.
Yeah,
But
or maybe they get like maybe the next, if you're not in the top 5, but you're in the next 5 or whatever, you get a 2-round bye at the grinder event that they do for like the last 4 last chance spots or something.
yeah, maybe maybe the last chance qualifier will be determined specifically by points getters or something like that. I know one is supposed to be open invite for sure, but I think there's more than one last chance qualifier. So
Yeah, we don't have any. Yeah. Also, so I guess this is a more immediate soapbox. We really need the details on this stuff soon.
yes,
People have PTO to plan. People have like, especially around the holidays, and people's families are asking them like, what are they doing for Christmas pretty soon here.
yes. I think it was 2 weeks ago when I was broadcasting. We talked about. I think it was Andrew Holder and I talked about how by the end of August we need to have this. That was the time frame.
Right.
I want to be, the small as the audience I have is. I'm pretty sure Spear is like the one viewer in all of our chats. He's always there for us. So, and he's always listening whenever he is there. He's one of the. Honestly, he's one of the brightest spots with Jasco. We were actually talking in the Discord earlier about how he had to deal with some toxicity coming into the game and how there's a lot of perception issues, with new players, old players, and new content creators coming over and stuff like that. And I can honestly say that dealing with the Spear through commentary, through the Discord, through stuff like that has been one of the brighter points, for my contact with Jasco in the My Hero era. And that's why I figured, I need to give them, if I'm going to complain, and like I'm just one voice, right? I'm just one person. But I think as a community, if we are going to complain about stuff, that we at least give them not only a chance to address it first, but we be very clear, like to people planning these events, 3 months notice might be like more notice than they've ever needed to plan a trip. That's just
Right.
a human being thing, right? Like that's just how people are. And I've heard people say, oh, wow, that's so long, like in advance to plan a trip. And like for me, I have to be able to plan like 5 months realistically, like in advance, just because of the way my life is. And I can't hold people to that metric either, right? It's not fair for me to say, my life is stupid, so you need to do it sooner. But that was the time frame I gave them, was by the end of August. If the event is in December, that gives you September, October, November, 3 months to plan. That seems like a fair time to plan like what could be like a 4 or 5 day trip. Because if you're planning to fly in and play a last chance qualifier, that is such a huge investment, right?
Yeah, I have to assume that those are going to be online. Right.
I want to say one was advertised in person in Las Vegas like the day before the event.
Yeah, I believe that's my memory as well. But the more I think about it, like, man, I don't know if they're going to be able to get people to do that. These things might have 10 people in them,
Yeah. It's the weirdest part about it to me. Like, it's the thing that I heard it went in one ear and like out the other, and then a month later I was like, a last chance qualifier in person in Las Vegas the day before the event. What that tells me is that there's going to be either crazy cool side events to get people to go anyway, or it's going to be the kind of thing where because again, I believe it was advertised, and this could all change, and I'm not official in any way, but I believe it was advertised that it would be open invite. It'd be a completely open tournament that anyone could join as a last chance to qualify. And it absolutely doesn't make sense to me to fly to Las Vegas, to schedule this whole weekend, and then play on Friday, lose in a tournament, and then have nothing to do. Like, it's not attached to a convention.
Yeah. They will almost certainly have side events and stuff, right? And it will be Las Vegas. Yeah, you live there, right? So there's to other people there's some novelty to Las Vegas. So
Yeah.
I think they'd get some takers, but yeah, I don't think they'd have 100 people in these last chance qualifiers or anything like that. But and yeah, we'll see how they plan that out. I think Lycian mentioned in chat like the size of the purse is definitely a large part of the like regional pressures stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say like don't do cash prizes or whatever, right? Or necessarily make it smaller. Like I assume it will be smaller in future years anyway.
Yeah.
But I do hope like bare minimum. I hope that this purse gets them something marketing wise, right?
Yes.
Like after this tournament, I'd better see articles on like Kotaku. I don't know. I don't know actually the names of all like the outlets that people seriously follow for this stuff.
It'd be
But I want to see a bunch of articles like out there online about, Omaha guy Jacob Johnson won $100,000 playing this card game.
right.
Right. Like I want them to leverage that for something and not just sort of quietly like, okay, cool. The people that play the game know nobody else does. It didn't
Yeah.
get them any recruitment value. 'Cause I bet because you're not going to tell people about that when you're demoing the game to them or anything either, right? It's literally only useful to like help people hear about the game.
Yeah, it most likely, right? Like the plan in today's environment is you invite I can't remember, is it one or two? There's like one or two special invite spots for the top 32, right? And then I've seen this in past games. This is just I think it was the Bakugan, the little rolling miniatures game that also is technically a card game. Like you roll them onto the card. They had a huge drive back in, I want to say 2016, 2017, where they were specifically inviting YouTubers from other card games to come play in their world championship for like pretty much the sole purpose of making a video called I played in the world championship for Bakugan or whatever, right? And I remember watching those videos and like the thing that fell really flat was it was like an 8-person invitational with like 8 YouTubers, or like one person in the event was like an employee at some point or something like that. It was very, very, very weird. And it was very, very, very shallow that it was like clearly we invited these people just to make a video about our game. And it's practically a sponsored video. It is everything but an actual sponsored video, basically. So I do expect something similar to that. I expect stuff like that. And I think one of the better ways to get awareness for the game would be to have YouTubers from other card games specifically talking about and reacting. So hopefully when the event does happen, literally that exact thing happens. We want all of the famous Magic, YouTubers, all the famous Yugi tubers and stuff like that to find out and go, wow, this guy got a huge purse.
Right. And I was gonna say like it might become an expectation, and that's a little scary. I think because it's the first year, they could probably like if assuming that they don't want to repeat this, assuming that they go back and crunch their numbers and be like, okay, that probably wasn't actually worth it. Right. They could probably spit it as like, yeah, we're probably not going to do quite as big of a thing next year. This is a first year hype thing kind of deal.
And we still don't actually have the pricing breakdown. I don't want to be negative Nancy. I don't want to take away from anything, but it is a total prize pool of an amount that we haven't actually seen for like 8 months. Yeah. The last rumor I heard on it was Funimation was upset about like specifics in advertisement or something, so they're trying to get the advertising like approved. You can't advertise something that you're not allowed to advertise, basically. So, that's a classic issue with the whole licensing of an IP. But if it's not the successful boom, if it's not the kind of thing where everyone's talking about it because it is this huge prize, then I don't think we will see that again. But if we catch fire, one of the things, Flesh and Blood really benefited from the fact that Magic had just like killed its Pro Tour. It was just reshaping its pro scene, and people were very confused about how it works. to this day, I've seen multiple videos trying to explain how the points for that system worked, and I still don't know. And they scrapped it like 2 years in, right? So without that sort of positioning, without that sort of gap in like a pro scene for like a Star City Games, for example, I think we really, really need the word of mouth. I think we really actually need just people to talk about it, just to mention it, just to react to it, or whatever the appropriate term is for a social media age. And in that respect, I think it's a really good idea. I don't think, as a competitor, as someone who's playing the game, I don't see anything wrong with putting up these prizes as long as the company stays in business and doesn't, bankrupt itself, which typically the prizing isn't always, it's not your money, right? It's investor money. But the total prize pool could, for example, include the trip to Las Vegas.
Right.
The Invitational advertises a full expensive paid trip for 32 people, right? If they paid for everybody, that could be the majority of the prize pool that was advertised. So,
it could be like 50,000 of it anyway. If you figure between the overseas people and hotel stays, it's like $1,250 per person or something on average.
Right. Yeah, and that's going to come down to when it comes to Vegas. Just from working in casinos and stuff, ton of it is schmoozing, right? A lot of it is we're going to. One of the biggest things I see all the time in Vegas is they're like, you get a vacation up to $10,000, right, or whatever, and it's like 8,900 of it is just the room, and then you get like a meal voucher. So
yeah, I would expect that they're not planning to do something quite that ridiculous, but yeah, anyway, it's just like I hope they get what they're looking for out of it, because that is a large expense, right? They could have had 5 more employees this year shipping stuff out, right? Like, et cetera, et cetera. And then, if they want to keep doing it that large, if they feel like they have to, like, I think that's probably fine, but maybe like make the process of trying to qualify a little less stressful.
Yes, definitely. And again, I guess my take on the points thing would be longevity. I think rewarding people for longevity, for having the points that you gather mean something past this year would be really cool. Just something for the people who are like, okay, well, I top 16'd literally every event and got, essentially, I can't say nothing from it, right? Obviously, you get your prizing, and Garrett Brett would tell me it's obviously not about winning and prizes and stuff. It's about the actual events and traveling. But I do think giving it some sort of value beyond just qualifying would go a long way towards that.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I remember it's you're talking about like consistency a little bit too. It's a moot now. Everything's right in the world now, but like before Orlando, when we were talking about the points totals because they had the wrong ones up, they still have the wrong ones up on the play site. They haven't fixed the Origins point totals yet, but like, JJ had seen the faulty ones and posted the thing where he was first in points, and now he is, but like he wasn't before Orlando, and people would be talking to me about it, and I'd be like, I mean, he probably should be first in points. He's made like 3 top 8s with 3 different decks, but the point system is he's not.
Right.
So, but like, this does feel kind of silly. Like I won one event with Bird and like made a top 16 and bubbled out, and somehow I have more points than like consistent, top cuts 3 different decks, winning with ham sandwiches, Jacob Johnson.
Yeah.
But then he won an event, so now we're all good.
Yeah, and I guess the litmus test right now would probably be Andrew Duvall, right? I think he was top. I think he specifically is top 4 to every regional.
He's not. He has not played in most of them.
Oh, is it? Okay.
He's been in some provisionals. I think he's only actually shown up in 2 regionals.
Oh, I might be confusing. I do get the provisionals and the regionals a little mixed up in my head. I'm not gonna lie. Especially with the actual broadcasting and stuff, like we're checking all these stats all the time, all the character breakdowns.
Yeah, I think Andrew's been in 4 events total now.
Okay.
It was pretty funny because in the first 3 of them he was eliminated by Kevin Broberg. Top cuts all 3 times.
Whack.
This time he finally dodged him.
Okay, yeah. It's definitely a name I see in the top cuts in the events I'm playing in. Like, whenever I'm playing in an event, I pretty much always see the name show up, so I figured he'd be. But see, that's the perfect example, right? Like, there's these between all the competitive events that are happening, there's people who are performing consistently, but if you're not making grand finals, if you're not actually winning one, you're probably still in the same boat as anyone else making any amount of top cuts.
Yeah, and he plays, his main game is obviously DBS, right? And so
Yeah.
like he's getting punished for having DBS things on the same weekends as some of these regionals.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That is an absolutely great point. If there's if there's like a main game, if there's other stuff to split up. I know, we've gotten some high profile people who play multiple games now. And yeah, I do see that a lot of the events they're just cross booked. So that's a great point. Getting double booked for events.
That said, I could imagine him, like, they haven't described what their criteria for the one invite is.
Yeah.
I could imagine it being Andrew Duvall.
Yeah.
That's one that would not upset me if they pulled him.
It would be pretty cool to, like, if we know it's, I guess, more player based rather than just
right. If it's not a media thing, yeah.
Yeah, which again, I could not blame them if it's specifically like we got PewDiePie, or I don't think.
yeah.
He's probably not persona. I don't think he's palatable anymore. I guess, but like just whoever the biggest YouTuber is who's never played a card game before, and they just show up and play some cards and win one game.
Yeah, we show up how to play the Railgun Osway and they make a deep run.
Oh, don't. Don't do that to me.
Hopefully something about that deck is
banned
long before that, honestly. But
that would be pretty funny, though. We just give dude, that's what it is. We got to get the #1 speed runner. Speed running is all the metrics on YouTube because of the way that they have these long video length, and people watch the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
We need to get the #1 speed runner. Give them the fastest deck, and then they can become the speedrun world champion.
Right.
That'll get 1 million views so fast it would make your head spin for our card game.
Probably not reflect too well on the game itself, though, I guess.
I mean, I think the idea is most people go, oh, wow, I didn't know the My Hero card game existed.
Right.
That's really what you're looking for. But you're not wrong. It wouldn't look the best, but again, like, just having those people there, right? Just having those people make any amount of content is really what you're looking for. So I couldn't blame them for that. I wouldn't begrudge them. I would be salty, but that's life, and I'd get over it. But I'd mostly be salty that I didn't qualify, right? I wouldn't even be about other people. So one thing one of our chatters talked about before we wrap things up here that I think is interesting. How do you feel about champ cards? As somebody with... do you have the most champ cards now?
Oh, God, no.
No? Okay. Well, I'm talking all cardboard. I know Garrett has 6 characters, but...
Yeah, it's still... Garrett has 3 or 4 teams or something, and in action and a foundation.
Fair enough.
Garrett has the most by a wide margin.
Okay.
I don't think I even have as many as Jeremy Ray, right? Because Jeremy Ray's got like 5 team cards or something.
Oh, the team specialist. Okay.
Yeah. I was teams cursed. I could not make a team's finals. Like, we lost in top 8 or top 4, like all of my teams.
Oh man.
Consistently, and it was definitely my fault some of those times. But so I did not win any teams events until that UK one in 2019.
That's what I was gonna say. I was like, I knew you had a teams event somewhere but
yeah. So, but yeah, they obviously can't do them for MHA, right? Because the license holders aren't going to. I assume I don't see why they wouldn't keep it as the prize for if and whenever they bring a multi-license format. They probably won't call it standard, realistically, right? You don't want to call that format standard, but they'll call it the Universes format or something. I assume they'll still use champs as the prizes for those because there's certainly no reason to do a big cash prize for it. Champ cards are pretty compelling.
Our game's going to grow, Tim. It's going to be one of the big 3.
Yeah, but and plus, like, it lets you diversify your pricing, and people who aren't attracted by cash prizes but think those champ cards are really cool might get into it for that, that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't, and they obviously definitely should print the ones that they owe, right? Dan Hughes, Ashley Fullerton, JJ, Jacob Johnson, Mark Tyner's 2 cards, Garrett still owed a card, a character card. So there's the 6 characters. I've lost track of what configurations of Omaha players have won all those teams events.
Yeah. I know Scott Sunman, Mark Tyner, Shane Duckworth was 1 year, and it's Scott Sunman, Mark Tyner, and I'm so I know who it is by
Clinton Thomas. Clinton Thomas. Yep.
Clint Thomas. Yep.
Yep.
And
yeah. So those were 2 of them, and then we had the 2. I don't know. I think they got 1 card of Chris Nixon. Rich B. Oh man, my names. But
Richard Dobson, I believe. No, it's Richard Nixon. I don't know.
Chris Nixon.
Richard Dobson.
Oh no.
I used to call him the Richard Nixon team.
There's this like mix and match like teams with Chris Nixon on them. Have 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, they'll need to track down the team. Somebody from Omaha probably knows, because I sure don't.
Yeah. And it's weird because designing a card for a format that doesn't exist, you don't know what the power level is going to be like. You don't know what mechanics you could actually get away with. That would be tough.
Yeah, it's sort of it's raw. I don't want to get into a huge like standard riot, right? But like it is essentially it's kind of wide open, right? They're allowed to decide anything they want for this format, right? I think my assumption and not there's not really any evidence of this, but I think it makes the most sense is to like hand pick the sets you're bringing in from other properties, like just leave Soul Calibur behind. It's fine. We just don't need to go there.
Forced rotation, selective rotation.
Yeah, but you could say like, all right, the Universe's format is going to be these 3 MHA sets and these 3 older sets, and we're going to pick Yu Yu Hakusho with 10 bands and 7th Cross and Street Fighter, or Yu Yu Hakusho 7th Cross and Street Fighter Dark Story, something that people can actually get, which is kind of limited. Or you just do the 2 sets, or you just say 7th Cross and Yu Yu, old stuff's old, well, whatever. But this is gonna be the spice. Like we're gonna have some reversals, we're gonna have some multiples. Maybe we bring in the DLCs from 2020 with 5 or 6 bands or whatever. Yeah.
So, I recently watched a video talking in this. I know I'm going back to Magic a lot, but it was talking about the Magic Invitationals, which used to be you had a card designed in your likeness was the prize, and people even in the video made 3 months ago in 2022 talked about how excuse me, their exact words, it's Pretty Deece, for anyone watching who knows the channel. Pretty Deece did a video where he said specifically, screw money, this is the greatest prize. This is actually the coolest prize. And that kind of blew me away because, I've been playing a game where that's like the main prize for years now. And people have always said that within our community, and I always thought it was a little copium. I always thought that having like a big cash prize would be pretty sweet. And now I'm staring down with it. We're talking about how like it's very stressful and things like that. Maybe the grass was a little greener on the other side, but I never thought it would come at the cost of the champ cards. And I think that's what's getting to me is that
provided Universe comes back into existence in some form in like sooner than later. And I think for people who think Jasco's not going to do it, I think even if you're really cynical about Jasco and whether they want to do it or not, they have to.
Yeah.
Right. You do not want to be in a situation where your whole company, your whole business is tied to the popularity of a shonen anime, of a specific shonen anime, right?
Not unless you own all of them.
Season 6 is going to be really cool, and this shows. I haven't read the manga or anything, but they're all hyped about it, right?
Yeah.
So season 6 is going to be super cool, I'm sure, and the show is going to continue to be really popular for another year or two. But like, this is business. You want this company to last 10 more years.
Yeah.
You do not want to count on anybody caring about MHA in 2030, right? Like, there's no way.
You
So
know, oh, go
they
ahead.
need the idea of a multiple license game to be in the minds of the player base that they have right now, so that they're not starting over again when they start their next IP.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. It's like I'm of two minds on it because when Flesh and Blood got really popular over COVID, I thought to myself, maybe Red Horizon could, or maybe Jasco could dump money into custom art for Red Horizon and sort of force a launch with like its own IP at the forefront, and like these are the main sets, right? These are the core sets, and then use other IPs for the crossover fun as almost like reprint sets. So that way you have all your main effects with your Red Horizon, property that has all this custom art, but it at its core, the crossover element is one of the biggest things to most of the people who play the game or played standard, played universes, I think, before. And crossover games are all the rage right now. Multiverses is dropping. Tam's playing it. Everyone's talking about it. And it seems like everyone has to have some kind of a crossover game. But my biggest fear recently, especially as we enter the anime world, is we might just get pushed out by Weiss Schwartz, because Weiss is picking up so many properties. They're coming out with so many different things I never thought they would actually like go after and acquire. Do you think that like the hunting down for the IP crossovers is necessary for the game? Do you think it's like needs it
Yeah.
to exist?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll probably. I mean, there's so many IPs out there, like as many as Weiss is getting. They'll still be able to find some. Like I wouldn't worry too much about that element of it. But back to like where I was trying to go before I wandered off. It is like essentially what it comes down to is like there is the only thing preventing Jasco from saying, here's what we're doing for a universal format, is they literally just have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Right? There's no other barriers really. Like you could say like, hey, we're gonna have a standard side event at the Nationals. And
Well,
it'll be for something. Or not standard, Universe's side event at Nationals, but it'll be for something, and here's what our format's gonna be.
real quick, I think they're not allowed to have
Oh, at their MHA events? Yeah, maybe not. You're
the
right.
one thing I was going to say the one thing I think that's actually stopping them is the lucrativeness of just hosting, of putting resources into the event, because they can't host it alongside the MHA events that they're focused on.
Yeah, or at least they couldn't put it on the MHA stream at the very least. They would have to be very clearly not an MHA CCG event. But they could hold it in the same room, I'm sure. So they just have to be careful with their branding.
I really don't know. It could be they could actually be locked into like not competing with MHA in any way, like not pushing their other card game products to compete with it, because legal wording can get really, really, really finagly. And like
Yeah, if it's but and they could do an online one, like whatever, right?
but
they,
you're
they
right.
could,
There is choices that they could just be making.
yeah, they could, but making decisions in a company can be hard. I've certainly been in companies where like it's not. It's a decision with some depth, right? But there's a lot of subjective stuff to it, and so what happens is you have a meeting with 8 people, and it's a brainstorming meeting, and that lasts 2 hours, and nothing really useful comes out of it. And then the next week, you have the follow-up meeting where you spend half of it rehashing the brainstorming that you know what I mean? Like you can get caught in that in a company like this, and I think Aspir's admitted to Jasco having a little bit of that going on. Yeah. So like that's my assumption of like where the like Universe's format stuff is mixed with like it's obviously not going to be their top priority. So it's just a little it's kind of unfortunate because like there is no like actual hard barrier to them making the decision. They're allowed to make that decision whenever they want.
Right.
They just need to like figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't consume way too much of their time.
Yeah, and that's, the official line I think right now is, maybe not official, but, one of the lines going around a lot is standard's only dead if you don't play it. And at the same time, it's one of those things where to organize it from a community standpoint, it what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't really behoove anyone to take the time to plan it and go through it right. And it's just one of those things where whenever it's official, it's better, right? Whenever it's official, whenever
and
it's
and even just knowing like there's virtually zero chance that they're gonna say like, all right, here's our universes format. It's the last 10 sets. Go get it.
right.
Like, there's no way that's going to be the real format at the other side of this. So, like, then you get into people guessing at what it's going to be, and then people can argue about what that guesses are. And, like, oh, I think Jessica would ban this card. Well, we're not banning it. Well,
Right.
why isn't this, And it just works better. It would work better if Jessica just said, all right, here's what we're doing.
And that was sort of my take. Was I had the one night standard event planned. I was going to go through with it. I went to hunt down prizing. At the time I was talking to Jasco employees. Like, I was like basically in this realm of I don't have an Asmodee rep, but I would like to get tournament kits, right? Or something like that. I want to do it the right way. I don't want to fake being a store and, come up with a tax code or whatever just to do this. And I don't want to just buy them illegally from people I know and get them in trouble. So, but the thing that I realized, the conclusion I came to was I didn't want to go through and do the ban list. I didn't want to decide what this format would look like and then have people, not want to play because when they think of standard, they might think of unwavering slash with all the tools, And on the flip side, I thought, how many people are going to want to play in a format that has unwavering slash and Kali Yuga? Just like that's like the thinnest layer, right? Like you can go way deeper. People were, I think, Sean banned the Ibuki DLC attack because of Asui using it, right? So like,
which is like probably not a real deck, but like if you're gonna run this one-off standard tournament that you want like MHA people to try out with TTS cards.
Yep.
You want them to have a pretty good time. And like
Yep.
Getting infinite looped on just isn't it,
Yep. Yep. It and that's it, right? Like that's the kind of thing where I didn't want to be the arbiter for that. And at the beginning I had advertised like basically a no ban list because I thought I'd get the drive and retro was cool in the sense that we were fact-finding. We were trying to locate the busted stuff, and you got to play with the busted stuff for one time only, or twice in Terry's case. And it was the kind of thing where as it got closer to it, as I talked to more people, it was just like so many people have so many different opinions, and this is why we can't get a commander format. This is why we can't get like other community formats, is because typically there's just too many sections of the community that wants one thing changed or they're not going to play. They're not interested if there's one little detail that's not right for them. And that's why when it's official, I think it's just better. It's just easier. If Jasco would just put out a ban list, somebody would probably host a standard tournament just because they said something.
Yeah.
Honestly, it might be me. Probably not me. I suck at every time I've tried to schedule a tournament this year, either an official Jasco event has landed on that weekend. I'm cross-booked with 2 out of 3 of these things actually have happened every time. Jasco event is on that day. I'm cross-booked with another community event that same day, or someone I take care of in my personal life is like leaving the hospital and needs 24/7 care, like literally that day, right? So 2 out of 3 of those things have happened every date I've tried to schedule an event. So if Jasco could just host an event, that'd be fucking great. If someone else can host it, that'd be fucking cool.
I talked a little bit more of a standard chat than maybe we meant to, but that's fine. It's definitely on the like somewhere on the like Jasco should be doing this stuff list.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's one of those like it's not the tippy top, but at the same time like whenever you're prioritizing anything that shouldn't take that much time should always just slide up so you can get it done.
Right. Well, and when it comes to PR, public relations, right? usually you go into it knowing you're not going to please everybody, and you're essentially, at least how it's been explained to me, is the methodology typically is please as many people as you can as quickly as you can to free up your queue. Then you start to please the people who have been upset the longest, right? And you try to keep it like respectable in that case, but you take free wins where you can. You get people out of your queue of being upset. You reset their tolerance level, because they're going to be upset again.
Since major incident, yeah.
Right, they're going to be upset again. That's the other part of it. Like when it came to the redemption loyalty stuff, the people who are upset about no standard were upset about that. Probably just to find something to be upset about, but at the same time, like, it is the relevant topic. So the more people you can please, the more time you buy yourself to actually fix what's going to upset them the next time. So again, I understand why they're not focusing on standard, and I'm not actually asking them to run one, because I know that if they could just sign people up and make a profit off of it, whatever, they'd be doing it, right? Like, it would just be, if it was good business to just do it, they would just do it. I do believe that.
But it's also, I don't think it's going to, I guess if it makes sense to this, it's not going to become more important at any point in time,
right?
Until like it's too late,
right?
It's going to be the same priority it is now for the next 18 months or whatever, until like, okay, we got our next IP, we still don't have a universal format,
right?
And so if they keep saying like, well, it's not a high priority, so we're not going to work on it. We have all these other things going on. There's always going to be other things going on.
Right.
It's just one of those deals. But it's all like company management stuff, not really.
Right. And that's, the community's done really cool stuff in the past with the Midwest Championship Series, and, when left to our own devices, there is very cool events that have happened. It's just one of those things where official is official. It's when it comes to community, there's too much of a, well, that's like your opinion, right? Like, that's but if it's an official ban list, whether we like it or not, it's the rules that we would all use, and that just makes it the most simple. But that being said, it is a Universes podcast, but we are getting a little off topic here. But I do want to wrap things up. We've been at this for over 2.5 hours, Tim. We've just been going.
My impression is this is kind of the norm for you guys.
Yeah, I don't know what the average time for the podcast is, but I usually just try to go until it seems like we've exhausted all of our topics. But
we don't need to talk about Eraserhead. It's fine.
Right. I could listen to you talk about
there's going to be plenty of that. So
hey, well, once he wins another regional, we'll be the talk of the town.
I was talking the 2-dot.
Oh, the 2-dot. True, the 2-dot. I saw it early this morning, and I thought to myself, that's half of Jiro, and then closed the tab.
That's also a substantial part of Lilith.
Yeah,
it's a little more exciting.
It's a super hot take, but can you believe Jose? Or I had mentioned that I think Eraserhead will get a Shigaraki style card, or what's it called? Not Turn to Dust, but
right.
The card that Shigaraki can block and ready himself, Touch of Decay. And I thought to myself, when I saw the Eraserhead 2 as a starter deck card, I figured for some reason he'd have a card that readies him. That the 1-dot can use to draw 2 cards twice, and that he would have a commit ability. And so far he does have a commit ability, and it is very possible that he has a card that readies himself. But when...
Yeah, I'm guessing they're not going to go to that well too much. Like, it would be a little cheesy if every character with a defensive commit got something that could ready themselves,
And especially
he certainly could.
Especially when it would apply to 2 characters, not just the one version, right?
Right.
But I did think it's funny that Jose pointed out, he said, why would he get that? Lilith didn't get that. But Lilith had access to that already with Tornado Hold. So I do...
Well, that's a deep one.
I do think it might be possible, but with Shigaraki, it's like only on your turn, and clearly like that character has the one defensive commit ability. Eraserhead 1 can do stuff offensively with this commit, so that might be a little too much for him seeing like a kill turn when your opponent's all tapped out. But I do think it'd be cool.
Everyone gets to kill on the backswing. It's fun.
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever get a generic character ready again, like a Hand of a? I guess. Would you consider Hand of a Tyrant generic? It's air character lock.
I've had to, having had to design it, I hate cards like that. I hate cards that make you worry about them every time you print another set.
Yeah.
Right. We had to do, back in the day, it was a Lizard Man check.
Mm-hmm.
There was a character that could play any low attack on your opponent's turn, and so every time we made a low attack, we're like, all right, is this going to be busted if this one guy plays a Lizard?
Yeah.
It's just not good. It's not healthy.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have that reptile check with mid attacks for a while with the reptile.
Yeah.
I think Bromley just banned reptile from Old Dog New Quirks too, because we were going over, and it's like, yeah, you could just relentless barrage people. Bromley thought the reveal 2 mid attacks and discard 1 card was once per turn, and we were like, no, bro, that's every attack. So.
Man, I miss the alligator meme. We should have had him legal just for that.
Dude, I'm upset I lived that meme. I don't know if it existed before the California PTC I went to, but that was my first event after taking like a year-long break. I got worn out from Bebop. I sold my collection to Sean O'Brien at Worlds. Accidentally sold him my signed Dave Wagner, and I'm still upset about it. And like, I didn't realize it for like 2 years, and I actually thought about hitting him up and being like, hey, did you get a signed Dave? But it'd be in a stack of a million cards. So, but anyway, so I come back to the game, and I'm playtesting, and all my locals are just playing dog shit decks. Like, it's just the truth for the format. They thought Katana and Shinnok with like aggro Shinnok with evil symbol combo attacks. Like, it was really weird. It was nothing like what ended up being the format. But I saw Reptile and thought this deck is like busted, like just on face. And, went to the PTC, made top 8, and immediately got smoked. Like, immediately got dropped. And by the time I left the venue after the top 8 match, went to go get a drink at the convenience store, and was checking my phone on the way back, people had already started posting memes about Reptile.
Oh yeah, it's that might be my favorite meme. Yeah. Just because I hate Reptile so much.
It's such a cheesy deck, dude. It's so cheese.
It's not. It's the mix. It's a cheesy offense, and like the just -3 damage all your moves. Yeah. If you happen to not be playing mid, it's just like felt like I don't like dumb gatekeepy decks like that, where it's just like, I'm not actually that good, but I really screw over this 30% of the field. Haha, I guess you just found your bad matchup. Too bad,
Yeah. And then the knee-jerk print a 0 diff hate piece.
Yeah. So I was always greatly entertained that he continuously made top cuts and then lost every time. Yeah. I believe he won a single top cuts match. I think it was Chris Nixon got to have the miracle. It might have been, I forget who it was. I don't want to assume it was Chris Nixon, but somebody got like the miracle reptile win in top cuts. Yeah. But he was like 1 in 12. So.
I think this was before I had joined the Shameless Discord.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It might have been the reason I joined it, because I definitely remember going on Facebook and seeing the memes and being like, hey, that's me. They're joking about me losing, and then talking about how the deck is fake. And I was like, oh no, I just started playing again. But genuinely, that event, I did not win any matches. My opponents just either... Maybe
we should replace it with Nomu. I feel bad. Jesse Perez, the guy who's playing the Lomu at Orlando, is a really cool guy, really nice. I had a fun time playing against him, but it's Nomu. Yeah.
Nomu, I guess it does kind of fit into the same style, or the same outcome.
So a very cheesy deck that gets into top cuts and loses. Yeah.
But I wouldn't consider Nomu to be a scummy deck. Reptile to me was a scummy deck.
You have to work with Nomu,
And I think I was playing specifically Water Reptile, which I don't know if that was the preferred symbol, but I was playing garbage Virus Unchained. I was playing I was playing like 8-3 difficulty attacks or something.
Yeah.
Just absolutely won a game because my opponent took 2 momentum turn 2 after dealing like 3 damage to me total, and I jammed double Virus Unchained first. Like, cool, Man, we're gonna get on every tangent possible. Yeah. So let me close it up. Let me wrap this up. Thank you again, Tim, for joining me. Thank you, everyone in chat. I'm gonna give you a chance to plug all your socials here. I do have a neat little Nightbot link, so anybody who wants to check out Satonis's YouTube channel or Twitch, you guys can follow, subscribe there if you'd like. If there's any shout outs you'd like to do, Tim, now is the chance to do so.
Yeah, I mean, shout outs to Rochester CCG, obviously. I live here. Sean's cool. Buy from him. But yeah, I got my YouTube and my Twitch. I've been trying to post little news updates, like 8 to 12 minute. Here's what happened in case you don't religiously follow the Discord like a normal person. And it's kind of like an as needed kind of basis. It's like sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's 5 or 6, depending on how quiet it's been. But sometimes on those, I'm trying to, like, if it's a really slow news week, do like a little 5-minute topical thing. But we'll see. If we keep getting enough news, I might not have time for those. I might split them out into separate videos, and probably going to do like little preview chats and things like that. My Twitch I haven't really been using aside from streaming 14 for friends, but I do like to stream like live deck builds and stuff. It's a little hard to do that with a 2-set meta. But we might do some of that for set 3. We'll see how it goes and how my schedule goes and things like that.
Are you designing any fan cards for Nick Reagan's contest?
I am not. I don't want to get into it, but yeah.
Fair enough.
It like sort of meant to, and then like didn't really, and then like forgot, and then like kind of meant to. I've accepted that I'm not actually going to do it.
I spent the first month trying to decide of like an IP to do, and then I spent like the next 15 days trying to decide on like an idea for it, and then on the 16th day picked a completely new idea and had new IP and had new ideas and stuff. So
yeah. I mean, I would go directly to Genshin Impact.
Ooh, okay.
It's a game I play and enjoy that would make a ton of sense for universes, but probably hard to get given it's Chinese. But.
Yes, and considering it's got some pretty mass appeal, it'd probably be pretty expensive. So, but you can go check out. Oh, go ahead.
I've not thought about Iron Chef. I've definitely thought about Iron Chef and like what would be involved in bringing that back, because those were fun. I think I guess I want to have 3 sets to build decks out of, just to really be able to, because certainly 2 sets is better than 1, but there's still a lot of like automatic stuff. And if set 3 is like has as much wild stuff as Jask was proposing, it could get pretty interesting.
And we have, we talked about how the events were kind of like back to back to back rapid fire. It's been tough every time. It's like, hey, I want to make content about this meta or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we have absolutely no racer heads in top, 4th kind in top, and here's our new Overlord Kirishima 2, right? Like it's stuff like that. Right. So it's there's so much.
I'm ready for our next Rikito Sato Overlords. Maybe that's the next thing. He is passing the torch. He's probably good against Kirishima.
Well, maybe Kirishima 2, or to me, Kirishima 2 is like Rikito Sato but better. You just got like a better damage pump, similar filter. You don't actually remove it from the game. Has defensive application, but like offensively, twice per turn you get a new card and some damage. Very similar. Stun 1 super not important into the mirror or into each other either, so that's probably a big part of it. But anyhow, thank you guys for joining us. I'm sure I will have Tim Keefe back here at some point in the future. Tim, it is always a pleasure. Again, just one of the best minds for the game, one of the most decorated players we've ever had. Again, going all the way back to, you said 2008, now in the My Hero era, the first person to win both a provisional and a regional event. We will see you guys all next week. And I'll give you the last word, Tim, if there's anything else you want to say.
Yeah, I'm good. Have a good night, everybody.